Are you worried about America's future? Times of trouble are full of reasons to despair. But those who built and have preserved our country didn't despair. And if we are going to do our part, we need to draw on the books, the history, and the ideas that gave our forefathers and mothers strength and inspiration. Hillsdale College was founded in 1844 to teach these things, and it teaches them still today. The great news is that we can all study these things along with Hillsdale College professors right in our homes. Through Hillsdale's free online courses, we can study the history of our civilization, the wisdom of ancient Judeo-Christian philosophers, and the writings of Shakespeare and Mark Twain. We can reacquaint ourselves with our Constitution. We can learn how the Constitution has been undermined, and more importantly, how it can be recovered. My friends, as we fight in defense of family, faith, and freedom, let us draw on the best of the past with Hillsdale's guidance to save the greatest nation on earth. Begin learning today at levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com, levinforhillsdale.com.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin. Our number is 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. In hour two, I think we have the first interview with Kevin McCarthy after the vote on Liz Cheney. In hour three, we have the former ambassador to the United States from Israel, Ron Dermer. So several big topics to discuss tonight, but I want to circle back to Liz Cheney. You see, the debate with and about Liz Cheney is not even about and with Liz Cheney. It is about a Republican Party and a decision about what this Republican Party wants to be. George W. Bush could not get elected president of the United States again. It's just not possible. George H.W. Bush could not get elected president of the United States again. The two presidents over the last several decades, Republican presidents, who won by massive landslides, or let me turn it this way, who got massive numbers of votes, were Ronald Reagan in 2 elections and Donald Trump in 2 elections. Now, this never Trumper movement is not about winning elections. It's not even about winning ideas. People like Mona Charen, who's become quite the whack job. Other individuals who I've known in the past. People like Adam Kinzinger, who lied to get elected the first time. These people have never really embraced the Tea Party. When you look at the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal, they trash the Tea Party left and right, and they embrace John McCain, who trashed the Tea Party left and right. Whether these men served in wars or not, and Liz Cheney, even though her father was a hawk, and I'm much of a hawk myself, if it means defending America, they're blind. They're absolutely blind. Now, what do I mean by that? We are facing a movement within the United States that is destroying our country. And Liz Cheney, and Mona Charen, and the rest of them, the Bush family, have no answers for it. In fact, they barely even recognize it. While you and we are confronting it, engaging it, fighting it, they're attacking Donald Trump and Donald Trump supporters. They have no clue about what's taking place in this country. No clue. And they have no answers. As I was saying, the issue with Liz Cheney is not about Liz Cheney. She is illustrative of a problem within the Republican Party. She's really not relevant in the least. She's one member of the House of Representatives. But the left and the never-Trumpers wish to pour their emotions and hopes into her, which, of course, is going nowhere. She's had nothing but contempt for Donald Trump and his supporters long before January 6th. Long before January 6th. So let's not pretend it was about January 6th. Same with Kinzinger, who didn't even vote for Trump the time before last. And they're not alone. But here's Liz Cheney at a press conference she had after she was voted out by the Republicans. Cut 6, go.
We have had the conference meeting. I am absolutely committed, as I said last night, as I said just now to my colleagues, that we must go forward based on truth. We cannot both embrace the big lie and embrace the Constitution. And
we're not. What are you talking about? Oh, you're the defender of the Constitution, is that it? But nobody else is. We've talked about this till I'm blue in the face. What was done in at least 5 states, but Pennsylvania in particular, and 3 Supreme Court justices who wanted to take up the case. Are they against the Constitution, too? Go ahead.
Going forward, the nation needs it. The nation needs a strong Republican Party. The nation needs a party that is based upon fundamental principles of conservatism.
No, of constitutional conservatism. Do you not support the Constitution, Liz? Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2? Did you read the 2 cases that were brought, one related to that and one related to another aspect of it? I've never heard you comment on this, ever. Or Tom Ridge, or Whitman, or Kinzinger, or any of the others. Go ahead.
I am committed and dedicated to ensuring that that's how this party goes forward, and I plan to lead the fight to do that.
Plan to lead the fight to do that? With whom? You know, there's a group of them. I see Barbara Comstock, former congressman from Northern Virginia. She used to work on Capitol Hill. She was quite the conservative bomb thrower back then. I remember. She would call me, and we would work together on various issues, and now she's a lobbyist of sorts. And she's thrown in with the left of the party, Whitman and the others I mentioned, talking about breaking off or starting a new party. That's how much they care about the Republican Party. They have benefited from the Republican Party. They have benefited from conservative activists all these years, conservative donors all these years, but it's all about them. And I've noticed how many of these people are actually narcissists. You can tell Liz Cheney is. Whitman clearly is. Kinzinger, through the roof. Let's go to cut 7 and listen to the great reporter's question. Go ahead.
Do you feel betrayed by today's vote?
I do not.
Does she feel betrayed by today's vote? Because you see, she's a victim. Now, of course, there aren't disagreements within the Republican Party, right, ladies and gentlemen? Everybody agrees with everybody. Ted Cruz agrees with Susan Collins all the time. Isn't that the case? And we could name scores of others. So this argument that Liz Cheney has to follow along or else Liz Cheney wanted to be the conference chair, the number 3 person in leadership in the House among the Republicans. She failed. They removed her. Turns out she was a dyed-in-the-wool, never Trumper. She would attack Trump all the time. Long before this, on January 6th. And it would have been nice if Liz Cheney went to the floor of the House and said, but I am very concerned that the people who threw Molotov cocktails and brought guns and other weapons to the Portland courthouse, almost none but one are actually being seriously prosecuted. I'm very, very concerned about Antifa and Black Lives Matter and how our Department of Justice, particularly the FBI, isn't tracking down these people and arresting them. I'm very, very concerned about the treatment these January 6 individuals are receiving in our prisons, even though I disagree with what they did. She didn't do any of that. It's Trump, 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 and she really hates you. That's what it's about. But she's a fighter. A fighter for what? For what? So do you feel betrayed, Liz? What was her answer, Rich? Go ahead.
That it is an indication of where the Republican Party is.
The problem is the Republican Party. Not her. Not the never-Trumpers. Not the sellout lobbyists. No. The problem is you. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Are you worried about America's future? Times of trouble are full of reasons to despair. But those who built and have preserved our country didn't despair. And if we are going to do our part, we need to draw on the books, the history, and the ideas that gave our forefathers and mothers strength and inspiration. Hillsdale College was founded in 1844 to teach these things, and it teaches them still today. The great news is that we can all study these things along with Hillsdale College professors right in our homes. Through Hillsdale's free online courses, we can study the history of our civilization, the wisdom of ancient Judeo-Christian philosophers, and the writings of Shakespeare and Mark Twain. We can reacquaint ourselves with our Constitution. We can learn how the Constitution has been undermined, and more importantly, how it can be recovered. My friends, as we fight in defense of family, faith, and freedom, let us draw on the best of the past with Hillsdale's guidance to save the greatest nation on earth. Begin learning today at levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com, levinforhillsdale.com. Where the Republican Party is, and wow, that was a horrible 4 years where the Republican Party is, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? The borders being secured, China being confronted, Israel being supported, more on that later. The economy booming prior to the pandemic and coming into a boom after the pandemic until Screwball screwed it up. Rebuilding the United States military. Wow. That's where the Republican Party was under Donald Trump, trying to put constitutionalists on the court. Donald Trump did more in terms of conservatism and constitutionalism than George W. Bush did in 8 years. In 8 years. He was weak on immigration and the border. His appointments to the Supreme Court, some were good, but then he tried a few others that were lousy. And we can go on. Liz Cheney cut 8. Go.
Are you the leader of the opposition in exile right now?
Are you the leader of the opposition? This is the genius Savannah Guthrie, see, because they really do think this is a cool thing. Go ahead.
I intend to be the leader, one of the leaders in a fight.
All right, let's stop. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't announce you're a leader. You become a leader. You become a statesman. You don't announce that you're a leader or you're one of the leaders. Now, this is pretty amazing. She's actually exposed herself in a very significant way. These never-Trumpers do not comprehend what we're facing in this country. These never-Trumpers are saboteurs. They can disagree with Donald Trump all they want, fair and square. But that's not what they're doing. They are political arsonists. They are political, I don't know what to say. And so they'd rather see the Republican Party lose. They'd rather see conservatives lose. They'd rather see the Democrats win and Biden win than otherwise. Look at Sidney McCain. Look at so many Republicans. Look at how George W. Bush was gushing to Clyburn at Biden's inauguration. How Clyburn had helped take down Trump. Look at Romney. Look how Romney conducts himself. They don't have a clue about what's going on because they've been in and around Washington and in and around the cafes with members of Congress and so forth, which is fine, but now they're part of the problem. These are pseudo-conservatives. These are pseudo-constitutionalists. If Liz Cheney really gave one damn whit about the United States Constitution, she would have supported the litigation in Pennsylvania that challenged what was taking place in Pennsylvania based on the federal and state constitution, not even on ballots or machines. She wouldn't do it. She didn't support it. And again, there were 3 Supreme Court justices in the one case who wanted to take up the case. How do we know? They said so later in another case, that this isn't going away. And ladies and gentlemen, it isn't going away. And as a result, we have HR1 and S1, which would destroy our voting system, make the Democrat Party the party in power for all time. So if you oppose what the Democrats are trying to do in Washington, you should have opposed what they were doing in the state of Pennsylvania. Liz Cheney said nothing. And she condemned Josh Hawley, who was raising it as an issue. I'll be right back. Are you worried about America's future? Times of trouble are full of reasons to despair. But those who built and have preserved our country didn't despair. And if we are going to do our part, we need to draw on the books, the history, and the ideas that gave our forefathers and mothers strength and inspiration. Hillsdale College was founded in 1844 to teach these things, and it teaches them still today. The great news is that we can all study these things along with Hillsdale College professors right in our homes. Through Hillsdale's free online courses, we can study the history of our civilization, the wisdom of ancient Judeo-Christian philosophers, and the writings of Shakespeare and Mark Twain. We can reacquaint ourselves with our Constitution. We can learn how the Constitution has been undermined, and more importantly, how it can be recovered. My friends, as we fight in defense of family, faith, and freedom, let us draw on the best of the past with Hillsdale's guidance to save the greatest nation on earth. Begin learning today at levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com, levinforhillsdale.com.
You're listening to Denali, the Great One.
The Great One.
And you can call in now, 877-381-3811.
Now, this is a big deal, the Liz Cheney matter, not because of what the media say, not because of what the never-Trumpers say, but because it indicates how sick our political system is. She's busy trying to take out Donald Trump, who's already not president of the United States. She says she needs to take over the Republican Party. Why? She won a single House seat in Wyoming? On what authority? Talk about the mind of an autocrat. The mind of an autocrat. Here's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. Let me put it to you this way. There was a big piece on how George W. Bush and Michelle Obama are actually best friends. They get along great. They're best friends. They get along great. Now, this is an amazing thing to me. You can be respectful, you can be nice to each other, but your best friends? Was somebody who's preaching critical race theory? Really? Do you have no common sense whatsoever? So George Bush, Liz Cheney, for all their toughness, for all their talk and so forth, they would never join you and me in the battles that we're having to deal with here. Never. Never. So who do they represent? Exactly. This is a problem. There's a complete disconnect. A complete disconnect. It's like bringing Karl Rove on our favorite cable channel to discuss poor Liz Cheney, what happened to Liz Cheney. He's part of that milieu. That's what they do. Nothing against him either. Seems like a nice enough guy. But he's not representative of anyone or anything in particular except the Bush-Cheney clan. We have a country to save. We have a country to save. Liz Cheney, for all her bravado, isn't prepared to help save the country. She's too busy, really, fighting in the mirror with an ex-president and attacking the base. And you see, the Republican Party needs to change. The Republican Party is on the precipice of non-existence. That's what H.R. 1 and S1 are all about. So while she's fighting with an ex-president, and while she's making the most outrageous statements about January 6th, which comports, of course, with all the outrageous statement being spewed by the left in the media, and therefore she is praised, while she's doing all that, you're losing your classrooms, your kids are being brainwashed, we're losing our economic system to the climate change fanatics. Our borders wide open. I don't think George W. Bush minds that too much. Our borders are wide open. People are getting hurt. They're getting abused. And this is what she's focused on. That's why they removed her as the conference chair of the Republican Party. She's not in reality. We have big tech banning people, banning speech. I don't hear her taking a lead on these things. She's not taking a lead on things that are crucially important to us as a people. She's stuck. She's stuck. In our colleges today, we're getting graduate after graduate after graduate who's being indoctrinated in Marxism. Has she lifted a finger to fight that? Let me give you an example. Let's talk about public school classrooms today. Publishers are pushing out books on critical race theory now at a brisk pace. Educational materials are being used in public school classrooms throughout America to indoctrinate and brainwash children. Now, here's the thing. They're getting some resistance in some counties, which is very, very important. But in some counties, they're all for it. In some school systems, Chicago, Buffalo, New York, L.A., they're using it. They're promoting it. It's as if we have two different school systems going on in this country. This is enormously dangerous. School teachers are being re-educated and trained in critical race theory. For example, and this is in American Marxism, is everyone really equal? An introduction to key concepts in social justice education. It's a popular book by Aslam Sensoy and Robin DiAngelo circulating throughout public education circles. In the book's foreword, James A. Banks, editor of the Multicultural Education series, explains the agenda. He says, this trenchant and timely book is written to help both pre-service and practicing teachers attain the knowledge, attitudes, and skills needed to work effectively with students from diverse backgrounds, including mainstream groups. A major assumption of this book is that teachers need to develop a critical social justice perspective in order to understand the complex issues related to race, gender, class, and exceptionality in the United States and Canada, and to teach in ways that will promote social justice and equality. The education departments in our colleges are actually the worst of the worst. The worst of the worst. Banks cautions that one of the most challenging tasks that those of us who teach multicultural education courses to teacher education students experience is resistance to the knowledge and skills that we teach. This resistance has deep roots in the communities in which most teach education students are socialized, as well as the mainstream knowledge that becomes institutionalized within the academic community and the popular culture. First of all, you notice how verbose these eggheads are. Now let's look at how the book breaks down its chapters. You ready? This is the indoctrination for teachers in public schools. One of the most popular books. Chapter 1, how to engage constructively in courses that take a critical social justice approach. Chapter 2, critical thinking and critical theory, that was invented by communists. Herbert Marcuse, I told you about him yesterday. Chapter 3, culture and socialization. Chapter 4, prejudice and discrimination. Chapter 5, oppression and power, straight out of the Communist Manifesto. Chapter 6, understanding privilege through ableism. They like to make up words. Chapter 7, understanding the invisibility of oppression through sexism. Chapter 8, understanding the structural nature of oppression through racism. Remember what I told you? It's the oppressor model. Chapter 9, understanding the global organization of racism through white supremacy. It's global. Chapter 10, understanding intersectionality through classism. We'll talk more about intersectionality another day. Chapter 11, yeah, but common rebuttals. Chapter 12, putting it all together. So he describes the ideological agenda intended by his book for educators. Banks says, we hope to take our readers on a journey that results in an increased ability to see beyond the immediate surface level to the deeply embedded injustice. Injustice that for so many of us is normal and taken for granted. Looking head on at injustice can be painful, especially when we understand that we all have a role in it. However, in taking our readers on this journey, we do not intend to inspire guilt or assign blame. At this point in society, guilt and blame, one second, circle something. Guilt and blame are not useful or constructive. No one reading this book had a hand in creating the systems that hold injustice in place, after all. It's pretty shocking. CRT is now firmly entrenched in American universities and colleges. Its reach is widespread. It is spreading like a virus in our public schools, in your kids' classrooms. Many of you know it. Many of you are concerned about it. Many of you are trying to deal with it. So we have this spreading American Marxism. And Liz Cheney, while she's worried about the spreading of Marxism overseas, and I certainly share that concern, she's undermining our effort here at home. She's a distraction. She's now, unfortunately, a useful idiot. That's why the Republicans had to do what they did today. People need to lead on these issues, America. People need to lead on these issues. The Republicans in the House and the Senate need to understand what we're up against. The Bush family does not. As I said, George Bush's, one of his best friends is Michelle Obama, who pushes this perversity. And so he can't stand up to it. And he never will. And he never has. And neither is Liz Cheney. So you need to have the right people in the right place in order to do battle with this wretched ideology. By the way, those of you who have pre-ordered your copies of American Marxism, I want to thank you very, very much. We now have pre-orders of almost 65,000 copies. In total, with ebooks and audio, almost 75,000 units. And once we hit 100,000 on the pre-orders, I really feel this will become a very, very powerful movement, spontaneous from the bottom up. From the bottom up. And I hope this book contributes to the effort the way Liberty and Tyranny contributed to the Tea Party movement. From the bottom up. Not from Washington and Capitol Hill down, from the bottom up. And this is also what she, Liz Cheney, the Bushes, and the others don't comprehend. They didn't like the Tea Party movement. Boehner attacked the Tea Party movement. It was attacked in the pages of the editorial pages of the Wall Street Journal. But who cares what they like? These are our children. These are our grandchildren. And this is our country. Who gives a damn what they like? So I hope you'll head over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Walmart or wherever you like to go online and purchase your books. Because we need to hit that mark. If we hit that mark, then I feel like we're on the move, big time. And I feel like the spontaneity, and let me use the Marxist term, the intersectionality of the movement with American Marxism, the book, and we will be back.
Mark Levin.
Are you worried about America's future? Times of trouble are full of reasons to despair. But those who built and have preserved our country didn't despair. And if we are going to do our part, we need to draw on the books, the history, and the ideas that gave our forefathers and mothers strength and inspiration. Hillsdale College was founded in 1844 to teach these things, and it teaches them still today. The great news is that we can all study these things along with Hillsdale College professors right in our homes. Through Hillsdale's free online courses, we can study the history of our civilization, the wisdom of ancient Judeo-Christian philosophers, and the writings of Shakespeare and Mark Twain. We can reacquaint ourselves with our Constitution. We can learn how the Constitution has been undermined, and more importantly, how it can be recovered. My friends, as we fight in defense of family, faith, and freedom, let us draw on the best of the past with Hillsdale's guidance to save the greatest nation on earth. Begin learning today at levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com, levinforhillsdale.com. Tell you what, I said to my wife last night, I have the greatest audience in the world, the greatest people listening to this program in the world. There we were, slipped the number 6 or 7 behind Stacey Abrams and Seth Rogen, Rogen being number 5 and Abrams being number 8 now. And you people rally. That's what you do. That's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do. I think once you get the book, let me just say this to you. This isn't a book that was written in 3 months. This isn't a book that was written by co-authors or ghostwriters. This isn't a book that was researched by a team of people hired by the publisher. I did all of this. I'm the rare author who does. But this book won't be able to be read in 1 night or 2 nights and 3 nights. This book has to be devoured like a good steak, 1 bite at a time, 1 chapter at a time, 1 paragraph at a time, because there's so much in here that you're going to need to take the time to digest it. It is brain food. It really is. Not because I wrote it, but I reread it and I said, you know what? I think this will do it. I think this will do it. I never, as Rush told me, first thing he advised me 20 years ago, never take your audience for granted and never, ever think your audience is stupid. I have never thought this audience is, that's for sure. Because you listen night in and night out is some of the most heavy discussion on radio anywhere in the country. And I give you kudos. Excuse me. I give you kudos for that. It's not always easy. But I want you to go away with something. Not just another slapdash or, thought or something like that, ripped off from somebody else. And that's the way these books go. And this is by far, in my opinion, the most important book I've ever written. It's the longest book I've ever written because of the dire circumstances that we face, that the never-Trumpers just don't get. But you do. And as I said, we're going to have to be able to put aside certain differences with other people, which Liz Cheney was incapable of doing. Mona Charen is incapable of doing. They want to keep running into walls. Well, we're not going to follow them. And why would we? They have nothing to offer. And so, that's the purpose here. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you. And I want to encourage you to get your pre-orders while you can, early on. The publishing world is watching this. They know what I'm telling you. The book review pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post, they know this is going on. They're trying to pretend it's not. At some point, they will strike. And we will be ready. I just wanted to thank you and tell you how proud I am and how kind you are. But we're going to do this together. We're going to do this together. We're going to build this movement, and we're going to do what we need to do. And you're the Thomas Paines of the modern era. You're the Paul Reveres of the modern era. And 100 years from now, I pray, and 200 years from now, your great-great-grandchildren will be looking back and saying, my family saved this country. I sure as hell hope so. I'll be right back.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. I failed to mention I will be on Hannity tonight, 9:35 p.m. Eastern Time. 9:35 p.m. Eastern Time. Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader in the House, is scheduled to be on this program in about 10 minutes. And in the final hour of the program, we're going to talk and go deep on what's going on in Israel with the former ambassador to the United States from Israel. That will be Ron Dermer. But before we do all of that, I heard Joe Biden say today, we need to graduate more kids who are highly skilled and educated to fight the cyber wars that are going on. He says, I've been saying this a long time, and then I thought to myself, isn't this the administration that is trying to destroy merit in our school systems? Isn't this the administration that doesn't lift a finger when the Commonwealth of Virginia is dumbing down mathematics and science by getting rid of these advanced classes? And we have one of the finest math and science schools in the country in Northern Virginia, and now we're getting into a quota system? Joe Biden is full of crap, always has been. There's a woman who showed up, I believe, at the Loudoun County, Virginia. It seems to be the number one place where a lot of this stuff is being hatched. It's the wealthiest suburb in America, actually the wealthiest county in America. I'm not counting counties with 14 people in it, but that's what it said. And they have a new school board, you see, and the school board is Democrat, and the school board is instituting all this stuff as fast as it can. So a mother showed up at the school board meeting, a black mother. She showed up at the school board meeting, and she was not very happy. Cut 19, go.
In the words of Martin Luther King Jr., I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Now I have a dream that we will implement love, not hate, or supporting another Jim Crow's agenda. CRT is not an honest dialogue. It is a tactic that was used by Hitler and the Ku Klux Klan on slavery very many years ago to dumb down my ancestors so we could not think for ourselves. CRT is racist. It is abusive. It discriminates against one's color. Let me educate you. An honest dialogue does not oppress. An honest dialogue does not implement hatred or injustice. It's to communicate without deceiving people. Today, we don't need your agreement. We want action and a backbone for what we asked for today, to ban CRT. We don't want your political advertisement to divide our children or belittle them. Think twice before you indoctrinate such racist theories. You cannot tell me what is or is not racist. Look at me. I had to come down here today to tell you to your face that we are coming together and we are strong. This will not be the last. Greet and meet respectfully.
Look at me, she says. She's an African American. Look at me. Look at me. We are coming together. We are strong. This will not be the first. This will not be the last. Meet and greet respectfully. Maybe we'll see more and more of this. I think we will. We have to help light a fuse for a revolution against what's taking place in our classrooms. This patriotic, wonderful mother sees exactly that. Because critical race theory also destroys minorities, particularly African Americans. It destroys them. It destroys their character. It destroys their motivation. Because just as it puts whites in a group, it puts blacks in a group. Not individual human beings with individual interests, individual characters, individual motivations, and on and on. No. Blacks are as victimized as whites, ultimately. Because you're not treated as an individual human being. You're put in a group, as Marx wanted you put in a group, so that you can be manipulated. So you can be angry. So you can be at each other's throats. Look overseas. Look at the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. This is how they live. This is what they want. We don't want it here in America. You don't want our country filled with radical hate mongers like Talib and Omar. Talib and Omar? How come there's all this talk about Liz Cheney and what she said to praise her, for which she should be denounced? And yet Rashida Tlaib, nobody's talking about her. Nobody's talking about Rashida Tlaib. And here she is, cut 3 on MSNBC. She's given a platform in major media. Cut 3, go.
I mean, this is an apartheid system. I mean, Israel's own prominent human rights organization, B'Tselem, has declared it. Human Rights Watch has declared it. And Palestinians on the ground have been telling us for decades that their homes have been demolished, that they've been targeted, that violence has been met by Israeli-led forces under Netanyahu's racist policies. What we're really telling Palestinians fighting apartheid is the same thing being told to my fellow Black Americans across our country here and that are fighting against police brutality.
I told you the other day, I know of nobody who hates America and loves Israel. I know of nobody who loves America and hates Israel. You see, they hate America and they hate Israel. Because these are very humane societies. Tlaib doesn't come out of a very humane society. Her parents don't, which is why they came to the United States, to escape the Palestinian situation under the Palestinians. And Palestinians are not free to come forward and tell us what's going on in the Gaza Strip. They're not free to come forward and tell us what's going on in the Palestinian Authority, or they'll be murdered. Murdered. If you're a Palestinian and you want to sell your home to a Jew, it's a capital offense. You'll be murdered. Palestinian Authority uses American money, has in the past, Trump cut it off, will now, to give pensions to the families of terrorists. The more Jews you kill, and Americans, by the way, the bigger your pension. You and I were paying for this. Apartheid, she says. Apartheid. You want to hear about apartheid? How many Jews live in the Palestinian Authority area? None. How many Jews? You want to hear about apartheid? How many Jews are left in Libya? How many Jews are left in Iraq? How many Jews are left in Syria? How many Jews are left in Saudi Arabia? How many Jews are left in Lebanon? How many Jews are left in Jordan? You want to talk apartheid? Let's talk apartheid. For that matter, how many Christians are left in any of these countries? Very damn few. Cut 4, go.
So sometimes I don't even use sometimes occupation or nothing because they don't understand
Now,
that.
what the hell am I doing? Shut the hell up, you anti-Semite. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Over 2,000 of you, my listeners, made the switch from overpriced wireless carriers to Pure Talk over the past few months. We want the rest of you to join us and to see what we're talking about. If you're with AT&T and Verizon or T-Mobile, your family could save over $800 a year just by switching to Pure Talk. You get great coverage, you can keep your phone and your number, and you'll save a fortune. Pure Talk is the top-rated wireless company by Consumer Affairs with the absolute best consumer service team based right here in America. Does that sound good? Well, it gets better. Right now, get unlimited talk, text, and 6 gigs of data, just $30 a month. And if you go over on data, they don't charge you for it. They don't care. Go to puretalkusa.com and enter promo code Levin Podcast. Again, puretalkusa.com, promo code Levin, Levin Podcast. And when you do, you'll save 50% off your first month. That's puretalkusa.com, promo code Levin Podcast. Pure Talk USA, simply smarter wireless. Well, we have with us the Republican leader of the House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Mark. How are you?
Let me look. I am doing great, thank you. A couple of things I wanted to discuss with you. First of all, Liz Cheney has been removed as the number 3 Republican leader in the House. And you're giving the reason why, and people simply won't accept it. Explain to the American people why she was removed by the others and why it was necessary.
Well, I think everyone has to realize that you get elected to Congress by your constituents. You get elected to leadership by the conference, and we serve at the pleasure of the conference. People want to go out there and say, oh, this is about impeachment and what someone says something right. No, if that was the case, she would have been let go before. The challenge is if you're the conference chair, your responsibility, your work is the message, right? Here we are with gas lines we haven't seen since Jimmy Carter. Inflation, the biggest inflation for the core inflation since 1981. We got missiles flying in Israel. We've got a government that wants to expand bigger than the New Deal and incentivize people not to work. We've got Russia going into our companies. We got China playing in the South China Sea. We got Iran shooting missiles at our ships. And she wants to talk about something in the past instead of defeating what the Democrats are destroying our nation. It's as simple as that. If you can't do the job, someone else will do it.
But she's always had a hate for Trump. Long before January 6th, she was trashing the hell out of him. Don't you? I mean, that's how I saw it.
Yeah, you saw it with the attack when it was the Russian bounty that was not true. A number of different items.
All right, let's talk about the agenda.
Yes.
We have inflation that is building up, and we haven't even gotten close to where it's going to wind up. it's almost impossible to put inflation back in the bag without a recession and a lot of pain. I remember Reagan had to do it, and he bit the bullet.
Interest rates.
Yeah,
12,
because
14%.
They were 14%. People were having trouble getting mortgages at 15, 14, 13%.
Could you imagine buying a house back then? I remember when I first bought my house, I had 8% interest rate. I thought that was great interest rate.
You were. It was. I had 12.5%. But here's the thing. Biden wants to spend another $4 trillion on top of even some of the Democrat economists are saying, slow down, Joe. But he's not going to slow down. He doesn't want to slow down. What's that all about?
All right. I just had my first meeting in the Oval Office, my first meeting with President Biden.
Yeah,
today.
Tell us about this.
He wanted to talk about infrastructure. We talked about infrastructure. But then I said, Mr. President, I want to take this opportunity because we haven't met before since you've been president.
All right, wait. This is the first time you've met him?
First time I met him since he's been president. First time we talked.
That's shocking.
I saw him in the front. Yeah. When President Trump was in, within the first 3 days, he had the bicameral, bipartisan meeting of both leaderships in the White House. No, not even talk. So I go in there and I said, I am scared to death with what I see. We saw the month-over-month of core inflation items like we haven't seen since 81. And you go on an economy where you're going to put more money. We've got a supply constraint. And then you're incentivizing people not to work. It is the opposite of everything you should be doing. We're going to end up back like Jimmy Carter. And I'm scared to death of what's happening, Mr. President. And then the other thing I brought up to him, I want to talk about the border. Mr. President, I've been down there. The vice president is sitting in the room. And you know what? For every single American, those young baby girls, one at 11 months yesterday, all by themselves, if it wasn't for that rancher, they wouldn't even be alive to this day. This is what's happening.
And what did he say? Anything?
Well, he went on about the border like he inherited something wrong. No, you inherited a secure border. You had the governor of California claim the population in California went down last year because Trump secured the border. That was his argument. Trump secured the border, so fewer illegals got to get into California, so California, for the first time, had a lower population. Can you believe that was the argument?
Do you think, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, do you think he's a dumb man, or you just think he is a stubborn man?
I haven't seen yet. The times I worked with him before, he wasn't a stubborn man. And I don't know if he's changed. I haven't spent time with him here. But I don't know if he's letting somebody else run, because he is not the same man that I knew when he was vice president. Because he has gone further than Bernie Sanders. True story. Mm-hmm. When he gave that joint agreement that most people refer to as the State of the Union, you go back and you greet him. That's the first time I was greeting him since the inaugural day, right? I walk out, and then there's a line, and it's Bernie Sanders. I walk up to Bernie Sanders, and this is the truth. I look at Bernie in the eye, and I said, Bernie, did you ever think you'd be more conservative than the President of the United States? Swear to God. He starts to laugh and says no.
Wow, so he agrees with you.
Yes. Think of this. When you looked at the New Deal, which people would thought, oh my God, it's the most we've ever spent, that was a little over like 5.5% of the GDP. What this administration has proposed, along with their budget, is like 27% of GDP. He inherited an economy that's growing, 5-6%? And then he wants to pile trillions of dollars on. He's got a supply constraint. Every economist would tell you in the world that is the worst thing you can do. You're going to drive inflation. You got inflation, what's happening right now since 1981. You know what that is? That's a tax increase on every single American. Mm-hmm. You got the national gasoline price is the highest it's been since the last time he was at the White House.
I think I'm paying $3.90 now. I think last year I was paying like $2.50, $2.80, something like that.
Oh my God, you're in California, you pay almost $5. But this has all the makings of Jimmy Carter. This is going to be stagflation. This is going to be probably when you had one of the best economies. When he says build back better, I said no. Let's just build back to how we were. 3.5% unemployment. Everybody could have a job. We incentivized people going to work. It didn't matter what color your skin is. It didn't matter what your education was. You had a job if you wanted it.
The only area in the polls where he seems to have positive number is on the vaccines. And it's amazing how he's been able to plagiarize that, pretty much, from Donald Trump. And I guess that's the media, but that's really the only positive area for him. How are we going to tell the truth? How are we going to get the truth out when the media is in his back pocket?
I'll tell you, you look at this media, my gosh. I watch how hard they went after me. They think I'm the new Donald Trump, attack me for every little thing, just because I'm willing to work forward and build the country back and stand up against this socialism. They are going to run out of everybody else's money. I mean, if you study modern history, this is Venezuela. This is Hugo Chavez getting in a democracy, trying to pack the courts, trying to promise you everything from daycare to free college, can't afford it, so then takes over your businesses. Gives away the IP for the vaccine that the American companies created that the other countries could not.
That's shocking. That is shocking.
Who's going to do that in the future? That destroys our R&D. Think about it. You know what China is doing right now. China's vaccine does not work, but they're utilizing it to other countries to get Huawei and everything else they want, the influence, their military bases. Here we are that have not one, but two, but three vaccines that are just working at 95% level. Everybody wants them. We could produce them. The American ingenuity created them, solved the problem. Let them go sell and produce it, but no, what does he think in a social view? No, give it all away for free. You're not going to get anybody else to invest and do it again.
All right. Well, I think you guys did a good thing. You have your number 3 slot open. I mean, we have got to be united in battling the left, or they're going to destroy this country. If we can't take back the House this time, I don't know that we're going to get another chance.
We're going to take back the House, and more importantly, we're going to take back this country.
Amen. Kevin McCarthy, thank you, sir.
All right, my friend. You take care.
All right. We'll be right back.
This is where Hollywood liberals come for rehab. The Mark Levin Show is back at 877-381-3811.
John Kerry testified today, and you know what I think about that? I don't care. I've got clips from what he had to say. He's an idiot. We already know that he's an idiot. So there's no reason to play clips that demonstrate that he's an idiot. You already know that Talib and Omar are anti-Semites, and they're anti-American. I played one clip too many, I think, when it comes to them. By the way, I'll be on Hannity tonight, 9:35 p.m. Eastern Time. I hope you'll join me. Has the Biden administration, Mr. Producer, put out a strong, affirmative, definitive statement condemning the Palestinian Authority? Have they put out a strong, definitive statement condemning the Palestinians? No. Now they'll condemn Hamas. That's easy to do. Have they put out a strong statement defending Israel? Now they use this phrase, Israel has a right to defend itself. That's a throwaway line. That's from a fortune cookie. Of course Israel has the right to defend itself, and of course Israel will defend itself. But they also talk in the language of the Israel hater, which is there's a clash between the two sides. There's not a clash between the two sides. There's a good side and a bad side. The bad side attacked the good side. That's not a clash between two sides. And Israel's escalating its attacks. No, Israel's defending itself. Did Israel fire 2,000 missiles into Gaza City? Did Israel fire 2,000 missiles in the Palestinian Authority territory? No, it didn't. If Israel wanted to wipe Hamas and everything on the Gaza Strip off the face of the earth, it would have been done already. If Israel wanted to wipe Abbas and his family and all the other crooks associated with that movement off the face of the earth, they would have already. But they don't, do they? Conversely, if Hamas and Abbas and all the rest of them in the Palestinian leadership had the power that Israel had, What do you think they do to the Jewish people? Well, we saw some of it in Lod, a modern Kristallnacht. We saw it in 1948 when the Jordanians burned the synagogues in Jerusalem. And Tlaib is there talking about apartheid. As I said before, you want to see apartheid? Look at every single Arab country in the Middle East. How many Jews are left there? Jews used to populate all these countries. Almost none. And as I said, how many Christians are there? Almost none. You want to see apartheid? That's apartheid. But that said, there was a breakout of peace in the Middle East as recently as September under President Trump. In comes Biden and his cronies, drawn from the Obama administration and worse. They can't wait to give hundreds of millions of dollars to the Palestinians without any strings attached, like, can you stop killing Jews? Can't agree to that. Can you at least recognize the existence of the state of it? Nah, I can't do that. Hey, we need a two-state solution, don't you think? No, I don't, as a matter of fact. How can you have a two-state solution? It would be Israel's final solution. And, of course, Biden and the boys and girls have breathed new life into the Islamo-Nazi regime in Tehran. Oh, yeah. Into Tehran. It's as if everything you could do wrong is being done, whether it's domestic policy or foreign policy. And it's quite shocking, really. We have 8.1 million unfilled jobs in this country, and yet we have the highest level of unemployment insurance in the history of the country, state and federal combined. A massive government welfare expansion, and we have 8.1 million unfilled jobs. So why are you massively expanding the welfare rolls? Why are you massively expanding unemployment benefits when little businesses are going out of business because they can't find people to hire? They can't compete with the welfare system. They can't compete with these unemployment checks. Little stores can't compete with the federal government. After these damn blue state governors shut down these businesses, they're trying to open, and now they have to fight Biden and the feds. Biden and the feds. We've got really serious inflation problems now. And Biden wants to spend $4 trillion more. You have to really be no wonder the guy flunked. Let me put it that way. No wonder the guy flunked. He needed to plagiarize to graduate college or law school or whatever the hell it was. Maybe he plagiarized more than once. Apparently he didn't plagiarize in his economics class because he doesn't know what the hell's going on, which is very troublesome. I want to read you something from the Epoch Times, which is a subscription service, but it is a fantastic site. And I want to ask you if this sounds familiar to you. This is from today. More than 120 retired U.S. generals and admirals signed an open letter warning that the United States is embroiled in an existential fight and urged all citizens to get involved in local and state politics. Quote, "We are in a fight for our survival as a constitutional republic like no other time since our founding in 1776. The conflict is between supporters of socialism and Marxism versus supporters of constitutional freedom and liberty," states the letter, which was signed by 124 former military leaders, released by Flag Officers for America. I wonder if Mattis and Kelly signed that letter. I'm starting to think a lot of these generals and admirals listen to this program, Mr. Producer. Marxism versus constitutionalism. That is precisely what's going on here. The letter also posited that opposition to proposed bills and laws that would strengthen election initiatives has troublesome implications. Election integrity demands ensuring there is one legal vote cast and counted per citizen. Signatories included retired Army Brigadier General Donald Bolduc, a Senate candidate in New Hampshire, retired Army Lieutenant General William Boykin, and retired Vice Admiral John Poindexter. Yay! Attaboy, John. Was the Deputy National Security Advisor to President Ronald Reagan. China is the greatest external threat to America, they write. Establishing cooperative relations with the Chinese Communist Party emboldens them to continue progress toward world domination, militarily, economically, politically, and technologically. We must impose more sanctions and restrictions to impede their world domination goal and protect America's interests, it says. Other threats they list include the United States re-entering the Iran nuclear deal, illegal immigration, the stoppage of the Keystone XL pipeline project. I mean, why would the ransom cyber warriors, Mr. Producer, bother shutting down our pipeline when Joe Biden will shut it down for him? Isn't that the plan? No carbon emissions by, 2035 or 2030 or 2040, something like that? Well, that means all the pipelines have to shut down. So I would think Joe Biden would be praising this. America, you like the long lines? You like the price of gasoline? You like the price of inflation? Well, this is what the Green New Deal is going to serve you. Plastic, steel, oil, gasoline, electricity, everything, food, toys, lumber. Prices are going to go up because they're at war with our energy system. And as I've explained to you, and as I write in the book, this is the degrowth movement. It's not about climate change, for God's sakes. Climate change? This is a war on your lifestyle. So you are owed, or owned, I should say, owned by the state. Your health care from the state. Your food from the state. The state determines how much electricity you're going to use, how much gasoline. The state, meaning the feds. No climate change movement, for God's sakes. Then we have this idiot, retired Admiral Mike Mullen, former head of the Joint Chiefs, said that the letter hurts the military and by extension it hurts the country. Shut up, you idiot. It doesn't hurt the military and it doesn't hurt this country. It's about time jerks like you went to the back row and the great patriots speak out. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Over 2,000 of you, my listeners, made the switch from overpriced wireless carriers to Pure Talk over the past few months. We want the rest of you to join us and to see what we're talking about. If you're with AT&T and Verizon or T-Mobile, your family could save over $800 a year just by switching to Pure Talk. You get great coverage, you can keep your phone and your number, and you'll save a fortune. Pure Talk is the top-rated wireless company by Consumer Affairs, with the absolute best consumer service team based right here in America. Does that sound good? Well, it gets better. Right now, get unlimited talk, text, and 6 gigs of data, just $30 a month. And if you go over on data, they don't charge you for it. They don't care. Go to puretalkusa.com and enter promo code Levin Podcast. Again, puretalkusa.com, promo code Levin, Levin Podcast. And when you do, you'll save 50% off your first month. That's puretalkusa.com, promo code Levin Podcast. Pure Talk USA, simply smarter wireless. Let's try this one. Maybe I'll say this on the Hannity tonight. Joe Biden has Hugo Chavez's domestic policy, Jimmy Carter's foreign policy, and Professor Erwin Corey's delivery. You like that, Mr. Producer? What a disaster. Wrecking Ball Joe. That's what he is. He's a wrecking ball. So what do we see here? The first 100 days. Can't wait for the next 100, can you, ladies and gentlemen? What could go wrong? What could go wrong in the next 100 days under Joe Biden? And by the way, who is really running this administration? Is it this guy, Ron Klain, his chief of staff? Big-time lobbyist? Another knucklehead? Is it him? Obviously, Joe gets tired. I mean, he makes the final decisions. And where is Joe every weekend? Isn't it amazing? We even know where Donald Trump is every weekend. Where is Joe Biden every weekend? Where's Wrecking Ball Joe? Where is he? We don't know. Now, often he goes back to Wilmington to one of his many estates, which he earned, the hard way as a member of the Senate. Became very, very rich as a U.S. Senator and thereafter. Nobody knows how or why, but nobody seems to care. Maybe Hunter knows. But anyway, why does he keep going home back to Wilmington, Delaware? I have a theory. Does he have a doctor there? I'm just asking. Because it's all so secret. And, of course, the corrupt American media doesn't give a damn. No, they're still chasing Trump. Damn fools. Mr. Producer, do we have a lib or do we have a regular American on the line there, sir? Oh, our call system is down, ladies and gentlemen. You want to try and take them cold? Does that work or not? I don't want to cut us off the air. We're having a North Korea moment here. We're trying to patch things together with Band-Aids and toothpaste. But then again, they don't have Band-Aids and toothpaste. You want to try one? Go ahead. Give it a shot. Yes, how may I help you?
Yeah, hi. My name's Larry. I live in
Now, Larry, what kind of pizza did you order, with or without pepperonis?
No pepperoni.
Are you sure you called the right number, Larry?
Oh, yes, I called the right
Do you
number.
like the thin slice, the thick slice, or what kind of pizza do you like? How may I help you?
I like well done and thin slice.
You're not a lib, are you sure?
Oh, absolutely, sir.
All right, how may I help you?
Okay, I heard you talking earlier about critical race theory in the schools, and I have a very, very prescient time today because we were listening on our school board meeting tonight, and coming to the meeting were some Black Lives Matter folks that were trying to get a proposal pushed in our school system that would have minorities hired 5 in 5 years as part of a diversity for our school system.
And what school system is this?
Rocky River, Ohio.
Rocky River, Ohio, a well-known white supremacist community. Is that correct?
I would not say that, sir. It's
No.
a nice suburb outside of Cleveland, sir.
Well, there you go. Can't have that.
Very, very nice community.
Can't have that. Can't have that. No. I know, this is really it's a cancer spreading throughout the country. Black Lives Matter called Israel apartheid and said they ought to give the land to the indigenous people. Well, the indigenous people are the Jews. They've been there 3,000 years. Ladies and gentlemen, this final hour of the podcast is sponsored exclusively by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. Now over 2 million conservative members strong, AMAC believes in and stands up for the values that we care about: faith, family, and freedom. Thank you for listening, and please support AMAC. And you can become a member at amac.us/join.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
It's a pleasure to have the former ambassador to the United States from Israel, Ron Dermer, also a confidant of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, Ron Dermer, hundreds, if not thousands, of missiles have been fired at Israel, particularly the population centers, from Hamas, Islamic Jihad, God knows who else. And I hear in the American media talking about, well, maybe we can bring this to a close. Both sides need to tamp it down. What is it about both sides need to tamp it down? Was not Israel attacked?
Well, there should be both sides when it comes to a terror organization and a democratic state. And that's what you have here. You have Hamas, which is an internationally recognized terror organization that fired over 1,000 rockets into Israeli cities. We've had millions of Israelis who've had to go to bomb shelters. We've had several Israelis who were killed. Just today, a 6-year-old was killed by an incoming rocket, a 6-year-old who lives in Sderot. We had a soldier who was killed by an anti-tank weapon. We had yesterday 2 Arab Israelis, a father and a daughter, were killed by an incoming Hamas rocket. And so anyone who is trying to create any kind of moral equivalency between a terror organization and the state of Israel should be ashamed of themselves.
And Benjamin Netanyahu spoke, and he sounded like a man on a mission, that we're not going to come to some easy peace here. We need to crush the people who've done this. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, you are reading it, because what happened is this Hamas tried to stir the pot, fired a rocket into Jerusalem, into our capital, and they would like nothing better than just to stop right now, because they achieved their goals from their point of view. They don't want Israel to respond. They don't want Israel to fight back. Imagine thousands of rockets coming into American cities, and then the terror organization says, you know what, we want to cease fire. We want to cease fire. Obviously, we're not going to accept that, because we have to exact a very heavy price from Hamas in order to restore deterrence, not just to immediately restore security for a few weeks or a few months. We have to restore deterrence. And that is based on how do you actually restore deterrence? Is you've got to exact such a heavy price that they understand that this was a big mistake, them deciding to initiate this violence, and you have to convince them that it would be a big mistake for them to do so in the future. That's how you restore deterrence. And we do that by taking out several Hamas terrorists, which we did today, actually quite a few, destroying capabilities, command centers, weapons depots of Hamas in Gaza to diminish those terrorist capabilities. And we're going to continue to do that until we feel that Hamas understands that this is completely unacceptable. And the best thing the international community can do, instead of issuing these wishy-washy statements that actually only make the problem worse, they can back Israel forcefully, say that they back Israel's right to defend itself against these terrorists. And when the terror organizations understand that they have no support or very little support in the international community, then they understand that they're not going to be able to achieve their goals. Those in the international community that talk about a cycle of violence and both sides and everybody has to, remain calm. Of course we'd like to restore calm, but we cannot allow a terror organization to win. And I think everybody who wants to see peace in this region should be backing Israel in fighting against terrorists. It's that simple.
I'm watching the American media again, including an individual from my favorite cable network. And the way they report this is they take the casualty numbers that Hamas gives them, and they keep reporting dozens of children have been killed or casualties and so forth. Isn't this what Hamas wants in a sickening way? Isn't this the reason they place their military outlets in certain places? Hamas didn't have to fire missiles into Israel. Hamas knew the consequences. Even though Israel tries their pinpoint strikes, it's impossible to miss everybody. What's your response to this?
That's correct. What Hamas is doing is they are committing a double war crime. They are targeting civilians, that when they fire their rockets, they're trying to kill as many Israelis as possible. They don't care if they kill children, women, makes no difference for them. They just want to kill as many Israelis as possible. But they also, as you mentioned, they also place their missiles in areas next to schools, mosques. They have a command center next to a hospital, for crying out loud. These are people who don't care about the lives of their own citizens, and they use them as human shields. And what they do, they play this game with the international media, and the international media, like Pavlov's dog, virtually always responds the same way. They attack us, Hamas attacks us, we have to respond in the most surgical way. And even the best army in the world, when you're dealing with terrorists who embed themselves in civilian areas, we could do everything we can to avoid civilian casualties, but unfortunately, when you're fighting a war, even the most precision weapons that you have, you're going to have civilian casualties, which is a tragedy from our point of view. We're trying to minimize the civilian casualties on their side. And we take measures that no army in the history of the world has taken to avoid civilian casualties on the other side. And mind you, Mark, we're doing this when our own citizens are being rocketed. This is not a war that is taking place thousands of miles away. This is right at home. We've got millions of Israelis in bomb shelters, and yet our army is acting with tremendous restraint to avoid civilian casualties among the Palestinians. And what they do, what the terror organizations do, is they believe that any time you have a civilian that gets killed on their side, immediately the world will come down on Israel, will pressure Israel to stop, and that's how they achieve their goals. And it's wrong. And if the international community wants to actually not only support Israel, which I'm not sure that they do, but if they want to actually protect Palestinian civilians and keep them out of harm's way, they should back Israel and place the blame squarely at the doorstep of Hamas, where it belongs. If Hamas and other terror organizations know that they can't get away with this, that they're going to lose in terms of their standing anywhere in the world. If they do action like this, then they're less likely to do it. If they think they can gain, then they're going to continue to do it.
There are elements within America, particularly within the Democrat Party, that are cheering for the Palestinian terrorists, that are calling Israel an apartheid state. There seems to be a growing element within the Democrat Party, even part of the media in this respect. This is a very more than troubling. This is an unconscionable event, isn't it? You see this growing movement here?
Well, any time that you have anybody that would side with terrorists against Israel, it's absolutely shameful. I was pleased, Mark, to hear many statements supporting Israel's right to defend itself, statements that came from across the political aisle. Some leaders in both parties were willing to come out very strongly, saying that Israel has a right to defend itself. What I hope will happen as we move forward, because inevitably as you do these operations, as I said, you can have the most surgical strikes that you can possibly imagine. But no matter what you do, there are always innocents who are harmed. I hope when that happens, that support does not diminish in any way, that people continue to back Israel, because believe me, there's no one here in the Middle East that cares more about keeping civilians out of harm's way than Israel. We value life. Our enemies value death. They glorify death and martyrdom. We value life, both the lives of our own citizens, obviously, but also the lives of Palestinians. And we will do anything that we can to keep those civilians out of harm's way. And if a tragedy happens, if a missile misses its mark, even in the most surgical strike by a few meters, then you find out who is actually backing your right to defend yourself, or who is going to dance to the terrorist tune, and who is going to start changing their positions. And one arena where you always see it, Mark, is in the UN Security Council, because this is the place where the entire world goes to gang up on Israel. And it is very important for the U.S. administration, the Biden administration, which has thus far not allowed that gang up to happen. It is very important that they continue to maintain that position and to allow Israel the time and space it needs to defeat this terror organization and to restore deterrence.
Well, if the UN or the United States or the European Union says to Benjamin Netanyahu, it's time to stop, obviously his number one priority is the protection of his country, so he's going to do what he has to do regardless, no?
There's no question about it, and I must tell you, Mark, the people of Israel are united, and they understand that we have to continue this operation to exact that heavy price from Hamas. There is not a lot of dissent in Israel about this, because we've got millions of Israelis in bomb shelters. We've got hundreds and now well over 1,000 missiles that have been fired, not just at Jerusalem, which has obviously the symbolic meaning of our capital, but a couple hundred rockets were fired into Tel Aviv yesterday. And people demand that their government give them this basic protection.
How many people live in Tel Aviv?
Well, there's greater Tel Aviv and Tel Aviv itself, but in the greater area of Tel Aviv, it's the heart of the country. And you're talking about well over 1 million people who live there.
And this, if I can just add another point, this is one of the reasons why your government was so concerned about the Iranian regime not getting missiles with nuclear warheads that could reach your cities, because the Iron Dome can hit 99% of the missiles coming in, but it would only take one, correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a completely different order of threat. Iran represents a threat to the very survival of Israel because of their ambition, as you mentioned, to develop nuclear weapons and also to build the missiles which can carry them, which, frankly, is what the Iran nuclear deal allows them to do. Everybody thinks that the Iran nuclear deal blocks Iran's path to getting nuclear weapons. It doesn't. It actually paves that path. And in the meantime, they're building those ballistic missiles that can carry nuclear weapons. And it's a very dangerous situation in the Middle East. And I hope that the leading powers of the world will not go back into this nuclear deal with Iran. This would be a huge mistake for peace and security in the region. It is very important to continue to confront Iran, to continue to keep the pressure on. That type of strategy is what actually brought Israel and the Arab world together. It actually brought peace agreements by having the United States stand strong against the common enemy of both the Arab states and Israel. And I believe if the Biden administration continues that policy, then you will see peace expand. If it moves towards appeasing Iran, then I believe it's going to set us back, and I think it's going to undermine security, not just in Israel, but throughout the entire region.
Just briefly and finally explain to the American people, while your country is fighting the terrorists and the missiles that are coming in and so forth, your country, your military also has to be watching for Iran and other enemies at the same time because of the multiple enemy factor that you have there, correct?
Yeah, well, you know, Moses, there's a joke that said that the problem was that Moses stuttered because he meant to take us to Canada, but, you know, he said, and then everyone went to Canaan, which ultimately is the land of Israel. So, unfortunately, we don't have the neighbors that you have. A lot of people think that the key to peace is mutually agreed land swaps. I think it's mutually agreed neighbor swaps. So maybe we take Canada and we'll give you Syria. And I understand you have a lot of issues with Mexico. We're happy to take Mexico, and you could take your pick in the region.
And we'll keep Mexico. You can have Biden. But anyway, go ahead.
We have a very dangerous region that we're in. We are blessed that we were able to achieve peace with Egypt that has held and weathered many, many storms for 40 years. We're blessed to have a peace agreement with Jordan and all its difficulties, but that has held for over 25 years. And we were blessed in the last year to achieve peace agreements with 4 Arab countries. But despite those peace agreements, we still have the very significant danger of Iran and its proxies. And Iran is a problem in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Gaza. It supplies arms to all of its proxies to the region that both endanger Israel and also endanger our Arab neighbors. And this, again, is why the importance of standing strong against Iran is so important for peace in the region. It is very important not to embolden Iran, not to embolden any of its proxies, and Islamic Jihad is a fully paid subsidiary of Iran. Hamas is supported by Iran. It is very important to send a message to stand strongly against Iran and to stand strongly for Israel. And I hope that this backing that the U.S. administration has given for Israel's right to defend itself, I hope that it will continue in the days ahead and actually be strengthened in the days ahead, and then we can get other countries around the world to stand strongly with Israel. I'll tell you the best thing that could be done right now, frankly, Mark, for Israel by different countries in the international community. You know, a lot of countries have said over the last couple of years, since the United States under President Trump made the historic decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and move the American embassy there, there are several countries who have considered it in recent years. This would be a wonderful time to do that, because the message it would send to the terrorists is that they lost, that they thought they were going to actually gain diplomatically, and now they lose diplomatically. And countries around the world, whether it's Canada, Australia, some Eastern European countries that were thinking about moving their embassy, if they did that now, that would send a message, a resounding message to the terrorists that terrorism doesn't pay. It sets the cause back. And not only will every Palestinian understand that, but terrorists throughout the world will understand.
All right, we're going to take a little break here. That was my conversation earlier with the former ambassador of the United States from Israel, Ron Dermer, because I think it's like 3:20 or something in the morning in Israel, and we didn't want to put him through that. But there's more to come. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, is one of the fastest growing organizations in America, now over 2 million conservative members strong, and I'm one of them. AMAC believes in and stands up for the values that we constitutional conservatives care about. More than talk, AMAC fights. A full-time presence in Washington, AMAC pushes back against reckless spending, disasters like Medicare for All, and the expanding reach of the federal government. And beyond advocacy, joining AMAC gives you access to a wealth of benefits and discounts, including special member-only rates on car insurance, travel discounts, cell phone plans, and a hell of a lot more. And if that's not enough, you'll get AMAC's bi-monthly magazine, full of insightful articles on issues that matter to most of us, we conservatives. As I said, I'm an AMAC member, and you should be too. Join today at amac.us. That's AMAC.us. Stop supporting the liberal agenda that the other 50-plus organization has been pushing for. Join AMAC instead. AMAC.us. Reminder, I will be on Hannity about an hour from now, 9:35 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, I want to encourage you, as strongly as I know how, please go over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or, what's that little store called, Walmart? But we want to get as many pre-ordered copies of American Marxism as we can. These generals and admirals are absolutely correct. They're absolutely correct when they say the United States is embroiled in an existential fight and urged all citizens to get involved. And they say the conflict is between supporters of socialism and Marxism versus supporters of constitutional freedom and liberty. Sounds like exactly what's in the book. 82,000 words or so. The longest book I've ever written was 68,000 words. That doesn't mean it's, oh my God, it's so heavy to... No. But like I said earlier in the program, you take your time, you're in no rush, you go from page to page, chapter to chapter, and then we get to the end, and we're going to do this together. We want to make the Tea Party movement, which I was part of, which many of you were part of, we want to breathe life back into a movement just like it and make it even larger and more sustainable. Because the battle we face now is even more complicated. It's in our classrooms, our government schools, and our colleges and universities. It's in our culture. It's in the media coming across our television screens. It is everywhere. Sports. And so we're going to have to be smarter, more flexible, and more united than ever before. And that's the point of American Marxism. Mark, what can I do? Well, this is my Thomas Paine pamphlet, if you will. And when he wrote The American Crisis, it wasn't just one pamphlet, it was a series of pamphlets. But you remember the first pamphlet and the first paragraph. The opening chapter of this book, I think, is enormously powerful, too. So everybody's watching. Everybody in the media world, everybody in the publishing world, academia is watching us, watching you and me. And we're going to demonstrate to them that we're not going anywhere, that we're going to protect our country, our children, and our grandchildren. So thank you, those who have, and thank you, those who are going to. When we come back, the rest and final few minutes of my interview with the former ambassador to the United States from Israel, Ron Dermer. AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, is one of the fastest growing organizations in America, now over 2 million conservative members strong, and I'm one of them. AMAC believes in and stands up for the values that we constitutional conservatives care about. More than talk, AMAC fights. A full-time presence in Washington, AMAC pushes back against reckless spending, disasters like Medicare for All, and the expanding reach of the federal government. And beyond advocacy, joining AMAC gives you access to a wealth of benefits and discounts, including special member-only rates on car insurance, travel discounts, cell phone plans, and a hell of a lot more. And if that's not enough, you'll get AMAC's bi-monthly magazine, full of insightful articles on issues that matter to most of us, we conservatives. As I said, I'm an AMAC member, and you should be too. Join today at amac.us. That's AMAC.us. amac.us. Stop supporting the liberal agenda that the other 50-plus organization has been pushing for. Join AMAC instead. amac.us.
Mark Levin, America's tyranny hunter. Call in now, 877-381-3811.
Here are my final few minutes with my interview with former ambassador of the United States from Israel and confidant to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Ron Dermer. Go. Mr. Ambassador, I'm reading here about a town called Lod that the mayor there at one point said, this is Kristallnacht again, that we have Arab gangs roaming the streets, going after Jewish families. 3 synagogues were burned. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, you had something of a pogrom in the city of Lod last night, and it had to do with not having enough security forces there, something that has changed today because Israel sent quite a large contingency of security forces to protect the residents of the town. And a lot of those people in the city were defenseless by essentially an Arab mob that burned cars, attacked people, burned synagogues. It was a very, very dangerous situation, and it has ignited an even more dangerous situation throughout the country in several cities where Jews and Arabs live together because of the lack of support for the Jewish community in Lod. Many Jews have now gone there tonight. They also went to other cities in order to protect the population, and because they feel that the police is not doing enough to protect the population. And while you have many people of goodwill who are there simply trying to provide protection for the local residents and stand up to these mobs, you also have some Jews who have taken the law into their own hands and have attacked Arabs as well. And so we have to put a stop to this as quickly as possible. It is very important. Look, you can have radicals on all sides. You can have Jewish radicals and you can have Arab radicals. The big difference that you see in Israel is what is the response of the leaders to the radicals? That's the question. What is the response of the leaders to the mob? Israeli leaders across the spectrum, left and right, condemn any acts of Jewish vigilantism, any acts of Jews who would, lynch an Arab citizen of the country to try to take the law into their own hands. That is roundly condemned. The problem that we have in Israel is when you have acts of aggression of Arabs against Jews, you do not see the leadership of the Arab population, the political leadership, I should say, because you do have some religious leaders who speak out, but the political leadership of the Arabs do not speak out forcefully against it. And it's very, very unfortunate that this has happened. I must tell you, in the last year, there's been a coming together, and it's hard to believe this when you see the scenes coming out of Israel, but there's been a strengthening of relations between Jews and Arabs. You saw that after the Abraham Accords. We saw that in the battle against Corona, where if you go to an Israeli hospital, Mark, you will see Jews and Arabs together, doctors and nurses working together to save lives around the clock. And I think there are elements within the Israeli Arab sector who are trying to undermine and to tear at that fabric of coexistence. This is certainly in the interest of Hamas. It's an interest of all the radical forces in the region to prevent Jews and Arabs from having coexistence within Israel. I think it's very, very bad. Hopefully we can put a stop to it as quickly as possible. Everyone should condemn acts of violence on both sides. And it's very important to restore calm in Israel because we are fighting at the same time that this is happening in several Israeli cities. We are fighting against a terror organization who's firing these rockets and is committed to our destruction. So it's very important that we unite. We do whatever we can in order to secure our citizens and hopefully put Israel back on a path towards coexistence between its Jewish and Arab citizens.
All right, Mr. Ambassador, we want to thank you for your time. We pray for the people of Israel, and we hope you and your family are safe as well. And God bless you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Ron Dermer, the former ambassador to the United States from Israel. Now, Joe Biden was speaking earlier tonight about his great success with the vaccines that he neither developed nor originally distributed. And there was a part of what he had to say that was left out. But luckily, I am the cleanup hitter, and we found it, and I want to play it for you. Here goes.
Mr. Merrick, we generally have a question period, and there were some questions that were asked me. Here is a question. Professor, why do you wear tennis shoes? Well, that's a two-part question. First, you ask why. Well, why has been plaguing man since time immemorial. Statesmen, philosophers, educators, teachers, scientists have been asking the ultimate why. And in these few moments allocated me, it would be ludicrous on my part, for the sake of brevity, to delve into the ultimate why. Do I wear sneakers? Yes! And so I feel that we must appreciate not only understanding, but as Joachim Ben Zakkai once said, remember, wherever you go, there you are.
Well, there you have it. Actually, it's a comedian, obviously. Professor Erwin Corey sounds smarter than Joe Biden. Now, Mr. Producer, we're going to give this a try again. Our phone system is kaput. But are the phones ringing? Is there anybody we want to just take cold? Let's give it another shot. Go ahead. Hello there. Are you there? Hello? I'm not hearing anyone, Mr. Producer. Let's try again, shall we? Hello, Frank's Pizzeria. Are you there? Dead. I told you our phone system's dead. We got one call through. That was it. I feel like this is the East German system here that we have here, but not. Black Lives Matter Los Angeles put out a statement earlier today. It said, Black Lives Matter Los Angeles stands in solidarity with the Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah and the West Bank. We are a movement committed to ending settler colonialism in all forms and will continue to advocate for Palestinian liberation. So the Simon Wiesenthal Center responded, don't conflate U.S. domestic issues with our country. Jewish people's connection to land of Israel goes back 3,000 years. Indigenous people aren't colonialists in their own land. How do you like that? Black Lives Matter is involved in the BDS movement, of course. Boycott, divest, sanction, which is intended to choke off Israel's economic lifelines, and this was pushed originally by the Palestinians, of course. Two-state solution, you see. And these words have been regurgitated, essentially, by Tlaib and Omar. Now, Tlaib is the child of Palestinians who came from the Middle East to the United States and settled, of course, in Michigan. Omar is a refugee who came to the United States as a teenager, both Muslims, of course. And they both hate our country. I don't think there's any question about it. And they hate the state of Israel. I don't think there's any question about it. And then when you add in AOC, who grew up in a fairly decent neighborhood in Westchester, New York, even though she pretends otherwise. What was her name? They gave her some Anglo name that she used. Whatever it was. Of course, she's long done away with that. She, and she's not alone, have joined in their hatred. And Chuck Schumer hasn't condemned them, hasn't said a damn thing. Nancy Pelosi hasn't condemned them, hasn't said a damn thing. The Democrats, who are Jewish in the House and in the Senate, haven't said a damn thing. Biden and Harris haven't condemned it in the least. At all. Because the Democrat Party has thrown in with these anti-Semites and these Marxists. That's a fact, and I'm prepared to defend it. In fact, it's so obvious, it doesn't even need defending. The media in America are almost silent on the subject. Have you noticed? But not me. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, is one of the fastest growing organizations in America. Now over 2 million conservative members strong, and I'm one of them. AMAC believes in and stands up for the values that we constitutional conservatives care about. More than talk, AMAC fights. A full-time presence in Washington, AMAC pushes back against reckless spending, disasters like Medicare for All, and the expanding reach of the federal government. And beyond advocacy, joining AMAC gives you access to a wealth of benefits and discounts, including special member-only rates on car insurance, travel discounts, cell phone plans, and a hell of a lot more. And if that's not enough, you'll get AMAC's bi-monthly magazine, full of insightful articles on issues that matter to most of us, we conservatives. As I said, I'm an AMAC member, and you should be too. Join today at amac.us. That's AMAC.us. Stop supporting the liberal agenda that the other 50-plus organization has been pushing for. Join AMAC instead. AMAC.us. Don't forget, I'll be on Hannity, 9:35 p.m. Eastern Time, and whatever time that is for you folks, you'll know better than I. I had fun with that first caller, though. Can we try again or no? Hello there. How are you? Hello, how are you?
Well, good, good.
What is your first name, sir, if you want to talk to Mark?
First name is Ryan.
And where are you from?
Just outside the People's Republic of Portland here in Oregon.
Before I put you on with Mark, can you prove that, sir?
Yes, how do I go about that?
Can you prove that you're Ryan?
Yes. How do I prove that, though? I mean,
well, you called here, sir. How can I tell you how to prove it?
Well, my name's Ryan. What else do you need, sir?
And where are you from?
I'm just messing with you. This is Mark. How are you, Ryan? What would you like to tell the audience? Uh-oh. Ryan. Can't we have a little bit of fun? We have to have a little bit of fun. I don't think I should do that to another caller. Do you, Mr. Producer? I can? Really? Hold on. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
Good. What's your name? Your first name only, please.
Michael.
Where are you from?
I'm from Delaware.
Why are you in Delaware?
I'm not sure.
Why would you live where Joe Biden spent his entire life?
I'm thinking Florida sounds like a better place to be at.
What does?
Florida.
Florida, yes. So why are you in Wilmington, for crying out loud?
I'm in Georgetown, south.
How many people are in Delaware? 17 or 18?
Well, they say around 900,000, but I don't know if I believe that.
Well, now that the Biden family's moved out, hey, did you ever meet Hunter Biden?
I did not, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. You say you did not?
No, I did not.
Can you prove that?
Oh, man. All I can tell you is I didn't. I could give you 3 mail-in votes saying I didn't.
Mm-hmm. Whatever you said, I agree with. So why are you calling the Mark Levin show? How may I help you?
I just want to agree with your open monologue about the...
hell, he knew it was me the whole time. I couldn't disguise my voice. Go right ahead, sir.
Well, you're talking about the difference in people, and I feel like the majority of the people that are anti-American are getting $700 a week to sit home, do whatever they want, and the rest of us are out there working. You have inflation. Pretty soon we're going to have... Basically, we're going to do stagflation, and what can we do about it?
Mm-hmm. Well, inflation, there's not a hell of a lot we can do about it right now, to be honest with you. What you got to do is look at your own money, where it is, talk to people who know what they're doing, maybe an accountant or something like that, financial planner, and figure out where to put your money, because inflation is coming. Oddly enough, when there's inflation, certificates of deposit, I'm just giving you a personal example, they return much higher interest rates. So a lot of people, particularly retired people, move their money into certificates of deposit. I only know that because of the last massive round of inflation in the late 70s and early 80s. That's where people were putting their money in certificates of deposit. And they were getting returns of like 16%. As a nation, we have to start winning elections, and we have to start reversing course because the spending and so forth is obviously completely out of control.
How do you reverse it, though, when people are getting paid?
Well, it's happening now. There's 30 states. I believe it's 12 or 14 states that have already canceled the increase in unemployment compensation, and there's 30 states total that I guess another 16 or so states that are looking to do exactly that. So that's a good start, don't you think?
One of the states have done it. I did.
No, several states have done it. I just said I think it's 12 or 14 states have actually done it.
That's impressive. The Delaware
It's very. What?
Delaware has not done that.
Well, Delaware doesn't do anything.
No, we don't.
Yeah, you breed Democrats. You got 2 dummies in the Senate. You got a dummy in the House. You got a dummy in the Oval Office. So,
11 and a half years left in my job, and I'm done. I'm out of the state.
That reminds me of an old commercial that was chased off the air. There was a postal worker, and I happen to be one of those that likes postal workers. There's a postal worker, and he's saying, only 10,312 days until I retire. And everybody figured out and said, wait, that's like 30 years. So that sounds like you. Hey, I only have 11 and a half years, and I'm getting out of here.
Yep.
You don't work for the post office, do you?
No. I work for a police department in the state of Delaware, and that's as far as I'll go with that. I am.
Well, it's nice to meet you, sir. Take care of yourself. And try and get the hell out of that state, because I know they won't have your back. Just saying. Thank you. Don't forget, I will be on Hannity in 1 half hour. We salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, and emergency personnel. And folks, please head over to Amazon, get your copies pre-ordered of American Marxism. I think once you read it, you'll see why. So I'll see you in about a half hour on Fox on Hannity. God bless. Ladies and gentlemen, the following segment of the podcast is presented exclusively by Hillsdale College. For over 175 years, 4 purposes have defined Hillsdale's mission: learning, character, faith, and freedom. Thank you for listening, and my sincere appreciation to our brothers and sisters at Hillsdale for their great sponsorship.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. Our number is 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Mr. Producer, I heard nothing. Okay? All right, folks. We've got a lot to get in here today. Let us start with the fact that the government has now told you that you don't have to wear a mask if you've been vaccinated. And Joe Biden comes to the microphone and says this is a great day to celebrate. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you didn't need to wear a mask if you've been vaccinated because of the science. Let's take a listen to what the CDC director had to say today. Cut 13, go.
Considering all of these factors,
there we go.
The data on vaccine effectiveness, the science on their ability to protect against circulating variants, and our growing understanding of the low risk of transmission to others, combined with universal access to vaccines for those 12 and older, today, CDC is updating our guidance for fully vaccinated people. Anyone who is fully vaccinated can participate in indoor and outdoor activities, large or small, without wearing a mask or physical distancing. If you are fully vaccinated, you can start doing the things that you had stopped doing because of the pandemic.
Now let's just stop here. Now let's just figure this out a second. It wasn't that long ago when they put out these obscene guidelines for camp, for summer camp, outdoors. That kids playing soccer or kickball or baseball or whatever would have to wear masks. This is just a week ago. Just a week ago. And this woman, all of a sudden she announces, like some kind of a fascist, that, okay, the CDC has determined that if you've been fully vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask, period. Small groups, large groups, inside, outside, with the idiot mayor of D.C. telling people, if you have weddings here, you can't dance. You had the idiot vice president and the idiot first or second man kissing last week with masks on. And all of us going, what the hell's wrong with these people? You had me talking, a month, 6 weeks ago, saying, if you're vaccinated, live your life. The whole point of a vaccination is that you're now immune. You're immune from giving, you're immune from getting. And they say the vaccine's 95% effective. So you're out of the woods. So at every turn, now Joe Biden comes out and he celebrates. We've made great progress today. He made no progress. He had nothing to do with anything. The vaccines were developed under President Trump. They had a distribution plan that was in place. They distributed what was produced right up until and through May. And yet, any of the positives he has in his poll numbers as a result of how he's handled the vaccine. So he comes out today. Everybody said, what kind of an idiot do we have in the Oval Office? Guys wearing a mask, nobody's even around him. Guys wearing a mask out on the South Lawn, nobody's even around him. He was asked last week, why are you wearing a mask? I'm wearing it, because I want to show the people what they should do. It's like, what the hell's wrong with you? Fauci's out there. Mr. Propaganda, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Just a few weeks ago, he said, double up on the masks. Just the other day, he said this could be seasonal, wearing masks. A year ago, he said you might want to wear goggles. This isn't science, it's pseudoscience. It's a joke. It's the private sector that developed these vaccines with the push and the backing of Operation Warp Speed. And it's Operation Warp Speed that's brought us to this point. Not the idiot president or the idiot vice president or the idiot over there at the CDC or the idiot, that's right, I said it, St. Fauci. And in addition to Donald Trump and his wisdom in this regard, there's one governor who's the biggest standout, and that's DeSantis. He fought these people tooth and nail. He had his own science experts. He used his own data. They were tracking it. They were tracking the federal data. He treated his citizenry like human beings. He wasn't destroying their businesses. He was trying to protect them. He had to protect his state from federal mandates. Joe Biden comes in office and threatens him. Threatens that they're going to come into Florida and impose their will on that state. The manner in which he issued the vaccine, starting with the elderly, his protection of the elderly in the nursing homes and the senior facilities. Ron DeSantis isn't a scientist. He's not a medical professional. He's a brilliant man who's gone to the best schools in the country, who served his country in the military. He's a red-blooded American who looked at this and said, wait a minute. I'm not going to turn Florida into North Korea. I'm not going to shut down our businesses. We're going to do rational things here. I had him on radio and have many times, same with television. And this is why the left attacks the man. But we all knew this too. Actually, more than a year ago, behind this microphone, I said the CDC data isn't correct. It's not correct. They're putting everybody and anybody who's ever had this virus in the death list. That is, anybody who died, no matter what they died from. And, of course, we helped break the story about what was going on in nursing homes in New York. The most left-wing, power-hungry, one-party state governors destroyed their states. And now you and I are paying trillions of dollars to subsidize them, even when they have now budget surpluses. Budget surpluses. We were told last month they had no money. Even the CDC lied to us. Even Fauci lied to us. People say it's all politicized. That's not enough. It's not just all politicized. Politicized how? We conservatives don't want to politicize science. We don't want to politicize medicine. It is the left. It is the left that has its power-hungry desires. It is the left that wants to control everything we do. It's the left that demands that you walk around with masks or other kind of equipment or body, whatever, because they insist that it's the science. The left that never follows the science. More on this when I return.
Mark Levin.
Are you worried about America's future? Times of trouble are full of reasons to despair. But those who built and have preserved our country didn't despair. And if we are going to do our part, we need to draw on the books, the history, and the ideas that gave our forefathers and mothers strength and inspiration. Hillsdale College was founded in 1844 to teach these things, and it teaches them still today. The great news is that we can all study these things along with Hillsdale College professors right in our homes. Through Hillsdale's free online courses, we can study the history of our civilization, the wisdom of ancient Judeo-Christian philosophers, and the writings of Shakespeare and Mark Twain. We can reacquaint ourselves with our Constitution. We can learn how the Constitution has been undermined, and more importantly, how it can be recovered. My friends, as we fight in defense of family, faith, and freedom, let us draw on the best of the past with Hillsdale's guidance to save the greatest nation on earth. Begin learning today at levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com, levinforhillsdale.com. See what's happening to this country economically. You have this attack on the colonial pipeline. You have the Russophile wing of our political and broadcasting system saying, what does Russia have to do with any of this? Well, of course, Russia has everything to do with it. You don't have a gang in Russia doing this sort of thing without Putin knowing everything about it. It's really preposterous. But that's part of the problem, not recognizing the problem. But part of the problem is also Joe Biden. Our electrical grid is completely naked. It can be easily attacked. We've had Peter Pry on the show, and we're going to have him on Life, Liberty, and Levin this Sunday, among others. And he wants almost everything to be pushed through our electrical grid. We're spending trillions and trillions of dollars and nothing to protect the electrical grid. So can you imagine? So to me, this was just a test. This was Russia taking a test through surrogates so it can have some kind of deniability. And Russia has extremely advanced cyber warfare capabilities. But economically, not only is what Biden is doing and the Democrats doing destroying us in terms of the currency, in terms of inflation, price of gasoline, the price of food, the price of building homes now, the price of everything skyrocketing. And they think it's a temporary bump. It's not a temporary bump. Not only are they doing this to tremendous damage to our economic system and to your families and to your savings and to your pensions, because the worst is yet to come by far, it's a severe national security problem. And yet throughout our government now and throughout corporate America and throughout academia and all the rest of it, they're pushing this idea of climate change. Climate change has nothing to do with climate change. That's a fig leaf. This is a war against capitalism. When you're attacking our liberty with critical race theory and these other things, you're also attacking our liberty through our economic system. Milton Friedman, tremendous man, Milton Friedman, he said, it is widely believed that politics and economics are separate and largely unconnected. That individual freedom is a political problem and a material welfare and economic problem, and that any kind of political arrangements can be combined with any kind of economic arrangements. He said the chief contemporary manifestation of this idea, listen to this carefully, is the advocacy of democratic socialism. That's him. Friedman condemns such a view as a delusion. And I point out there's an intimate connection between economics and politics, that only certain combinations of political economic arrangements are possible. And that in particular, a society which is socialistic cannot also be democratic in the sense of guaranteeing individual liberty. Friedman says economic arrangements play a dual role in the promotion of a free society. On the one hand, freedom in economic arrangements is itself a component of freedom broadly understood. So economic freedom is an end in itself. In the second place, economic freedom is also indispensable. An indispensable means towards the achievement of political freedom. Viewed as a means to the end of political freedom, he says, economic arrangements are important because of their effect on the concentration or dispersion of power. The kind of economic organization that provides economic freedom directly, namely competitive capitalism, also promotes political freedom, because it separates economic power from political power, and in this way enables the one to offset the other. He said history suggests that capitalism is a necessary condition of political freedom. It is, of course, also possible to have economic arrangements that are fundamentally capitalistic and political arrangements that are not free. So he's saying, look, you can have a communist China and have an economic system that tries to parrot capitalism. But you cannot have a free country, a republic, a constitutional republic without capitalism. And you can see that, ladies and gentlemen, because they have to breach the limits of government's power in order to advance their Marxist economic agenda. Like a wealth tax. A wealth tax is utterly unconstitutional. Your private property rights. Utterly unconstitutional. Or to go in and shut down the Keystone XL pipeline like you're some randomware cyber war attack as a matter of policy for Biden that endangers his country. You are not free to treat people's incomes, people's livelihoods, people's private property this way. And yet, Bernie Sanders, AOC, the Marxists, and others in the Democrat Party and in the Oval Office, that agenda, it's exactly what they're about. It's exactly what they're about. So the less economic freedom you have, the less political freedom you're going to have. That's his point, and it's absolutely true. And they're under attack. So climate change is a propaganda line to lure people into this whole ideology. But it is a degrowth movement, which is an anti-constitutional movement, which together are anti-individual liberty movements. And that's why this is very, very important to focus on. We've talked about critical race theory. I haven't gotten yet to the immigration issues and the gender issues and so many of the other movements that are incorporated in this American Marxism movement. But this isn't an environmental movement that's taking place in this country right now. This is an anti-capitalism, anti-growth, anti-profit movement. And Friedman was exactly right. This democratic socialism idea is absolutely preposterous. So I want to encourage you again. This is a whole full chapter I discuss in American Marxism. I want to encourage you to take a look at that when you get your copy eventually, and to pre-order your copy. So again, we hit the ground running when the time comes. And this chapter is chapter 5. It's called Climate Change Fanaticism. Climate change fanaticism. And I put climate change in quotes because it literally has nothing to do with climate change. It's like the mask. The mask after you have been vaccinated. The mask was irrelevant. The mask was an exercise of governmental power. So if you get a chance, head over to Amazon. I hope you'll pre-order your copies. I'll be right back. Are you worried about America's future? Times of trouble are full of reasons to despair. But those who built and have preserved our country didn't despair. And if we are going to do our part, we need to draw on the books, the history, and the ideas that gave our forefathers and mothers strength and inspiration. Hillsdale College was founded in 1844 to teach these things, and it teaches them still today. The great news is that we can all study these things along with Hillsdale College professors right in our homes. Through Hillsdale's free online courses, we can study the history of our civilization, the wisdom of ancient Judeo-Christian philosophers, and the writings of Shakespeare and Mark Twain. We can reacquaint ourselves with our Constitution. We can learn how the Constitution has been undermined, and more importantly, how it can be recovered. My friends, as we fight in defense of family, faith, and freedom, let us draw on the best of the past with Hillsdale's guidance to save the greatest nation on earth. Begin learning today at levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com, levinforhillsdale.com.
Mark Levin, the great one.
The great one, Mark Levin.
Dial in now, 877-381-3811.
Tell you what's amazing to me. I'm watching, during the break, our favorite cable network. And a guy reporting from Jerusalem by the name of Trey Yingst, who's being praised all over the place there. Very brave young man. Very brave young man. He's in the middle of the battle. And he says that Hamas officials speaking to Fox News and talked about the casualty numbers. Hamas officials speaking to Fox News. Now, this gentleman also some time ago was free to walk around in Gaza among the Hamas terrorists. He's free to walk around in the Palestinian Authority-ruled areas. Now, why would they let him in like that, and why would the Hamas terrorist group... Hamas, ladies and gentlemen, wants to kill not only Israelis, but us. They're backed by the Iranians. Islamic Jihad is an Iranian creation. They all work with Hezbollah and other terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda. So Hamas officials speaking to Fox News? Really? Now, some people might say that's great reporting. I find it to be really shocking. Shocking. And I'm going to talk more about what's going on over there later. Israeli ground troops have now moved into the Gaza Strip, because Netanyahu is very, very serious about dealing with this. And just so you know, on Sunday's show, Life, Liberty, and Levin, I have the former ambassador to the United States from Israel, who we had briefly on the program here, Ron Dermer. And also for the second half of the program, we're going to have Dr. Peter Pry, who's going to talk about what happened with that colonial pipeline and what could happen if we don't take this much more seriously and stop pretending that the Russians aren't behind these things, or the Chinese, or the Iranians, and the North Koreans. Because they are. These things don't just happen from groups within Russia or groups within whatever. And to say such a thing is, well, it's crack pottery is what it is. Now let me circle back here to quote the late great Psaki. Federal taxes, spending, and deficit all set records through April. Terry Jeffrey over at CNS News. So he takes a look at the monthly Treasury statement. He said this is the first time that federal spending has exceeded $4 trillion in the first 7 months of a fiscal year. First 7 months of a fiscal year. And he takes a look at that. He says when the historical October through April tax revenues are adjusted for inflation into April 2021 dollars, the second highest tax revenues for the October through April period came in fiscal 2018. He looks at the debt. Unprecedented. The deficit from October to April 2021, second highest deficit. This is the highest deficit in American history, of course. So we have the highest spending, the highest deficit. Federal taxes are all setting records. And we have a government that won't secure the border. Oh, I hear they're going to build 13.5 miles of wall on the border. Now think about that. We have several hundred miles left that need to be built. But they're only going to build it on 13.5 miles. And what's the rationale? Because this particular area is heavily flooded by illegal aliens. So you're probably perplexed by now. Why? Because if 13.5 miles of wall will stop a particularly heavy insurgence of illegal aliens from coming in, then it is clear that the wall works. Despite all the lies by the left. So obviously the wall works. Or why would you build 13.5 miles in that particular area? Why not build the rest? Because they don't want to. And they lie about it. Trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars being spent. They talk about infrastructure like they actually mean it, and they don't. But the wall was too expensive. What was it, $10 billion, $20 billion? Well worth every penny, don't you think? CNBC and every place else, inflation speeds up in April as consumer prices leap 4.2%. That's the highest in 13 years. The highest in 13 years, the consumer price index. They had been looking for a 3.6% increase, but it was 25% higher. And listen to how this is spun by your corrupt media. One big reason for the acceleration was base effects. At this time a year ago, the economy was hit with the worst of the COVID pandemic, and inflation, well, was unusually low. But it really picked up lately, you know, and that's because the economy is opening up. No, that's not because the economy is opening up. And let me explain this so the fools at CNBC and elsewhere can understand. As Milton Friedman pointed out, too many dollars chasing too few goods is one of the most signal reasons why inflation is created. If you have an economy that is naturally and spontaneously booming, that's not too many dollars chasing too few goods. That's a growing economy. That's a healthy economy. But when you spend trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, and the Republicans were part of this initially, quite frankly, but now the Democrats make the Republicans look like budget cutters, you get massive inflation. This has happened in post-war societies. It happened in Germany. It happened in Japan after World War I. Happened after World War II in some of these countries. You look at the third world where they have dictators, Marxist regimes, they print money. And that's why the money's worthless. And so you have barter societies and you have impoverishment and so forth. This is not speculation. There are laws to economics, supply and demand and so forth. There are laws to economics. Just as the Democrats and some rhinos, but particularly Biden, do not accept that there are laws in a republic that they should honor. Just as their surrogates, Black Lives Matter and Antifa, don't believe there's laws they should honor in our cities. Why would they honor the laws of economics? They want power. They've got control of the Treasury. They'll spend and they'll print and they'll print and they'll spend and they'll pretend there are no laws of economics, just as there's no civil society to worry about. The result is inflation. The fact of the matter is if endless spending, endless annual deficits, massive debts created wealth, and there was no downside to it, which is what the left tells you all the time, and there's no downside to it, we would all support it. I'm not talking about the government control end of it, but if you can create wealth, why not? But it doesn't create wealth. It destroys wealth. It creates economic dislocation. It takes money from the producers because, by God, they're successful and we can't have that, and gives it to people who haven't earned it. We now have small businesses in this country that can't make it after going through the pandemic, particularly in blue states, after being pounded by false science and false idols. Now they can't find people to work. 8.1 million jobs are unfilled, the highest in history. And the Democrats still support the expanded so-called unemployment benefits. Well, if you can get a job, then you shouldn't get unemployment benefits if there's 8.1 million jobs out there. But that's not how it works anymore, because they're not complying really with the laws of economics. It turns out the Colonial Pipeline paid about $5 million in a ransom to get the network back up from the hackers. And Joe Biden, again, acts like this isn't any of his business. It's not a big deal. That's a private matter. Now, wait a minute. These hackers out of Russia attack a pipeline that they know will require or will cause enormous economic dislocation in southeastern America and on the east coast of America. In other words, it's an attack on America. That's why they're attacking the pipeline. And weren't you shocked to learn we only have one pipeline there? Shouldn't there be multiple pipelines to protect us? This is what I mean about this degrowth movement and so forth. It's also a national security interest or concern. So Biden says it's really not, it's a private matter whether they pay ransom, and then he's not sure, he can't be sure that Putin's involved. Putin's testing him. Russia is testing him. The Palestinian terrorists are testing him. Hamas is testing him. And he's failed every damn test. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Are you worried about America's future? Times of trouble are full of reasons to despair. But those who built and have preserved our country didn't despair. And if we are going to do our part, we need to draw on the books, the history, and the ideas that gave our forefathers and mothers strength and inspiration. Hillsdale College was founded in 1844 to teach these things, and it teaches them still today. The great news is that we can all study these things along with Hillsdale College professors right in our homes. Through Hillsdale's free online courses, we can study the history of our civilization, the wisdom of ancient Judeo-Christian philosophers, and the writings of Shakespeare and Mark Twain. We can reacquaint ourselves with our Constitution. We can learn how the Constitution has been undermined, and more importantly, how it can be recovered. My friends, as we fight in defense of family, faith, and freedom, let us draw on the best of the past with Hillsdale's guidance to save the greatest nation on earth. Begin learning today at levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com, levinforhillsdale.com. I taped a 7 or 8 minute segment for Brian Kilmeade at his 7 p.m. hour on Fox. And at the very end, I'm asked about Liz Cheney, and I talk about it. And at the very end, I said, why do we care about Liz Cheney? Why do we care about Liz Cheney? So Colonial Pipeline pays a huge ransom to get the network back from the hackers. Now, let me say something that's not intended to be controversial, but is intended to shine a light on the situation here. When you have a degrowth movement that is embraced by the Biden administration, well, one of the first things he does is shut down a pipeline that's to produce oil and send oil, I should say, from Canada to the United States. When you have basically a rejection of all new pipelines in this country, and when you say that we're going to get rid of carbon dioxide, which means fossil fuels in the next 10 to 15 years, it's like we have a ransomware president. In other words, what I'm trying to say is this so-called climate change movement, this Green New Deal movement, is 1,000 times more dangerous than what just happened. You just got a taste of what's going to happen. But it's going to happen from within. We're going to do it to ourselves. Texas got a taste of what happens when their grid went down. Californians got a taste of what happens with brownouts and blackouts. Now the East Coast and the Southeast have had a taste of what can happen with this cyber war attack on one pipeline. One. We have thousands of them. And so what's going to happen? Joe Biden is a human pandemic. He's a human pandemic. He's taken what had become a magnificent energy industry where we had energy independence, where the prices were relatively cheap. Now you have these gas lines because one pipeline is hit. Now, if you're a rational human being and you see something like that, you conclude, you know what, we better have some backup pipelines. We better have some more systems in place. And we'll use all potential areas of energy production. But we're certainly not going to take the main one and shut it down. And imagine, as I said earlier, if everything were based on on electricity. Everything's based on electricity. What if they hit the grid? You know, we have these massive transformers, as Peter Pryor has explained. They're massive. You don't have backup transformers just sitting in the warehouse. And one of the reasons is we don't make them. They're not made in the United States of America. They're made overseas. And each transformer takes 18 months to manufacture. That's when you have electricity. So if you have factories overseas that make transformers and there's no electricity, they're not making anything. We don't even know how to communicate with them. Think about if the electricity goes out. Forget a moment about this oil pipeline. What happens if your electricity goes out for 6 months? There's no food. There's no refrigeration. There's no gasoline. There's no functioning hospitals. There's no functioning law enforcement. There's no data. There's no way to communicate. There's nothing. And you can't have clean water because our water systems and the cleaning of our water systems now are all digitized. The banking system collapses. Government can't communicate. The military can't communicate. And despite those who irresponsibly defend Putin and the Russians, Russia has an extremely advanced and sophisticated cyber warfare capability that some people think is better than ours right now. Because that's where Putin has focused so much of his resources. Imagine if that happens, and imagine if it happens and we don't have alternatives like oil and gasoline and coal. Imagine that. The nuclear power plants are going to go down too. So will the windmills that rely on electricity. There's nothing. This was a walk in the park. And you can see people, if you live where I live, lined up, the gas stations closed, everybody grabbing the those containers that you put gas in for your lawnmowers and so forth. They're filling those up. People are hoarding gasoline. And now over 50% of the gas stations in Virginia don't have any gasoline. Well, that's the future. Unless we take some rational and relatively inexpensive steps. I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. What I'm trying to say, not necessarily very articulately, is this. The policies that we are now imposing on ourselves, and by we I don't mean you and me, this government, the Democrat Party, with the support of the corrupt media and corrupt academia, are going to make this colonial pipeline issue look like a joke. They're going to make it look like a joke. They're going to make us vulnerable to our enemies. That's exactly what they're doing. And they use this degrowth anti-capitalism movement because they want power, more government, more centralization, more regulations, more economic impoverishment, which again allows them to step in and decide who gets money, who doesn't get money, redistribute wealth, and all the rest. You can look even at the border. You have illegal immigration. You have MS-13 coming in. You have drugs coming into this country. We've never seen anything like this, where we literally have a president and a Democrat Party that wants people to come into this country illegally. That shows you how un-American they are, for sure. But it also shows you what they're up to. And what's the cause of this great surge, ladies and gentlemen? Could it be Joe Biden's mouth? Could it be their policy? Could it be reversing the Trump policies? No. It's the climate. Cut 18, go.
When I took a group right before COVID, say about 15 or, I don't know, a year and a half ago about, to the Northern Triangle.
Pelosi.
To the countries I mentioned, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. Recognizing from previous visits and to the border over and over again that violence, economic hardship, but that's not a cause for amnesty, but nonetheless a reason why somebody might leave home.
Now let's stop right there. Well, actually, go on again.
Violence and corruption and all those things were what were causing people to flee.
All right, let's stop right there. And I've said this before. I want to underscore this. When Donald Trump called these places S-holes, he was said to be a racist by her, by little Dick Durbin, and by others. Now she's describing S-hole cultures and countries, isn't she? I mean, how else would you describe violence and corruption and hunger, economic hardship, she says? So it's really quite amazing. When Donald Trump called it what it is, that's why tens of millions of people are trying to leave these countries. Now Pelosi calls it the same thing without using that phrase. Nobody calls her a racist, but that's not even my point. Go ahead.
What I learned in that more recent visit was that the climate issue was having, and the drought was having such an impact on the agricultural industry there that people were lost their livelihoods. They lost
so you
their
see,
jobs.
It's the climate issue. We've never had droughts before. Never had economic hardship before. Never had difficulty producing food before. No. You don't understand. It's the climate. And so we must have more and more control, more and more open borders. You see, to use the left's term again, as I did yesterday, intersectionality. You see how these things intersect? I'll give you another example of this. Then we'll move on. Jen Psaki at the White House briefing today about critical race theory. And when you get your copy of American Marxism, you're going to know more about critical race theory than any other human being on the face of the earth. Critical race theory in the 1619 Project. I hope you saw my Fox show last Sunday. And the great Peter Wood, the scholar, professor, and so forth. Cut 21, go.
Senator Tom Cotton says the nation's wealthiest colleges are indoctrinating young people with what he calls un-American ideas. He is proposing a new tax targeting the largest private endowments. He says it would raise $2 billion a year. I wonder, does the president believe that our wealthiest schools are indoctrinating our youth with un-American ideas? And would he support such a tax? Is it a good idea?
Now you've intrigued me. What are the un-American ideas that are indoctrinating our youth?
The legislation doesn't lay out the precise...
he's not specific about the indoctrination by...
Now look how she's mocking. Because she's a crackpot. She's a moron. Look how she's mocking. Go ahead.
Well, he's been critical of, for example, the 1619 Project. He's been critical, spoken about critical race theory. He's claimed that there's a liberal bias on campus that targets conservatives, I think would be a way to put it.
What's he going to do with the money?
So who's questioning whom here? And the reporter loves playing along. What's he going to do with the money? It would go into the general tax fund. You're familiar with taxes, aren't you, Psaki? Oh, and what is he? What's the indoctrination? What's the issue? What's the problem? I don't understand. Go ahead.
Programs for I'm having a hard time coming up with the word. When you have job training, those sorts of things.
Without much detail of where he thinks our youth are being indoctrinated.
Excuse me. He has a lot of detail about what he thinks and knows is happening to our youth in our classrooms and indoctrination. Just because the idiot reporter can't speak, that idiot reporter doesn't speak for Tom Cotton, who actually knows a lot more than the idiot that you represent, who can't finish sentences. Go ahead.
Yes, and dangerous. Although I don't think we believe that educating the youth and the future leaders of the country on systemic racism is indoctrination. That's actually responsible.
Oh, so she does know what Tom Cotton's talking about. Isn't she clever, ladies and gentlemen? So she does know what Tom Cotton's talking about. Teaching about systemic racism. No. That's actually responsible, she says. This is what I mean. And by the way, is there anybody whiter than Psaki, Mr. Producer? Maybe she knows something about systemic racism. But you have in the Oval Office a president, you have a vice president, you have a large staff that hates the country. Systemic racism. I don't view the American people that way. I view this country as a melting pot where we have people of all colors, all backgrounds, all faiths, working side by side, shoulder to shoulder, to make this civil society function. They're in foxholes, in S-hole places all over the world, defending people of all walks of life, all colors, all religions. It's the American people who make this country work, not the government, not the politicians, not their laws. She's on the public payroll. How could you be the spokes idiot for the idiot in the Oval Office if you believe this country is systemically racist? How could you work for such a country? It's really quite shocking, isn't it? Go ahead.
I would say if he's trying to raise money for something, then...
Shut up, you idiot. You're not even clever. You're actually stupid. You're actually very stupid. Like the guy you work for. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Over 2,000 of you, my listeners, made the switch from overpriced wireless carriers to Pure Talk over the past few months. We want the rest of you to join us and to see what we're talking about. If you're with AT&T and Verizon or T-Mobile, your family could save over $800 a year just by switching to Pure Talk. You get great coverage, you can keep your phone and your number, and you'll save a fortune. Pure Talk is the top-rated wireless company by Consumer Affairs with the absolute best consumer service team based right here in America. Does that sound good? Well, it gets better. Right now, get unlimited talk, text, and 6 gigs of data, just $30 a month. And if you go over on data, they don't charge you for it. They don't care. Go to puretalkusa.com and enter promo code Levin Podcast. Again, puretalkusa.com, promo code Levin, Levin Podcast. And when you do, you'll save 50% off your first month. That's puretalkusa.com, promo code Levin Podcast. Pure Talk USA, simply smarter wireless. There's a reason why I start the last chapter of American Marxism with the title, We Choose Liberty. We choose liberty. And I say in the first 2 paragraphs, in other words, I want you to know, have a pretty good feel of what's in here without getting into 95% of it, so you feel comfortable pre-ordering it and joining me in what we're going to create here, a big-time movement. I'm often asked on radio, what are we going to do about recovering our country? Too often what is meant is, what is someone else going to do to save America? That mindset is simply unacceptable. If we are to rally to the defense of our own liberty and unalienable rights, then each of us, in our own roles and ways, must become personally and directly involved as citizen activists in our own fate and the fate of our country. The time has come to reclaim what is ours, the American Republic, from those who seek to destroy it. If we expect others to rescue our nation for us as we go about our daily lives as mere observers to what is transpiring, or close our eyes and ears to current events, we will lose this struggle. And yes, it is a struggle. We have allowed the American Marxists to define who we are as a people. They defame us, slander our ancestors in history, and trash our founding documents and principles. They're mostly reprobates who hate the country in which they live and have contributed nothing to its betterment. Indeed, they live off the sweat and toil of others while they pursue a destructive and diabolical course for our nation, undermining and sabotaging virtually every institution in our society. Their ideology and worldview are based on the arguments and beliefs of a man, Karl Marx, whose writings are responsible for the enslavement, impoverishment, torture, and death of untold millions. This is a hard fact, despite the predictable protestations from some in our society who embrace and advance Marxism's core ideas, but have and will attempt to disassociate themselves from responsibility for its inevitable outcomes. These are the useful idiots who occupy influential or leadership positions in the Democratic Party, media, academia, and the culture, and so forth. I won't go beyond that, but this is a very important and powerful chapter, the final chapter, where I lay out really scores of suggestion, actions, and steps that you can take, I can take, and we can take together. And so the entire foundation is laid down. I explain what's happening to our society, who, in part, is responsible for it, who, in part, is promoting it. You'll have a better idea. You know, if we do not understand the enemy, I don't say adversary now, I say enemy. If we do not understand the enemy, we can't defeat the enemy. Like any other operation or procedure. And so we will understand the enemy together. We will take our time. We will go through this. Believe it or not, I'm doing the final editing on the book. It's all due on Monday. It's all written. It's been edited. I've gone through it multiple times. I'm going through it one more time to see if I should adjust something, add something, remove something. And as I read it, as the author, as the person who's researched and written it, I actually believe, and you're going to say it's self-serving, I don't need to be self-serving. I actually think it's more powerful than when I first completed it and put it down. And nobody's harder on me than me. And so it's very, very important. We're now at 65,000 pre-order hard copies, over 75,000 units when you include ebook and audio. And I very much want to get to the 100,000 mark. So as I've told you before, when the book comes out, you and I and we can know and participate in 100,000 copies reaching 100,000 people or more. And then from there we can grow it to a million man and woman march. By that I mean a political and substantive and conservative and pro-American army of millions. They're going to change the face of the country from what's taking place here. I'm not a Pollyanna. This isn't going to happen overnight. But I also am an activist. Yes, I write. Yes, I broadcast on radio and TV. But I'm an activist. And all of us need to become active. Small roles and big roles. In our own lives, with our own families, and in our own communities. I'm not a preacher, even though from time to time I'm accused of preaching. That's the situation we're in. I want to talk about what's going on in the Middle East now. And in the context of what's going on in America about what's going on in the Middle East. Our friends at the Free Beacon point out that the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a terrorist organization, is praising Democrats in our country for attacking Israel. Now, we have some new members of the House of Representatives. In the case of Omar, she's a relatively new citizen. In the case of Tlaib, her parents came to this country. They came voluntarily. They wanted to come to this country. And they were welcomed with open arms. But they hate our country. This is one of the reasons why in the past, and of course you're not allowed to say it, but I will. In the past, if you wanted to become a citizen of America, you had to pass a loyalty test. You were questioned about your loyalty to the United States of America and your allegiance. And you had to agree that you would assimilate into the American culture. That doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't happen anymore. We have fantastic legal immigrants who come into this country. Don't get me wrong. And some of them are far more patriotic than the left in this country, including citizens of long standing. But that's not what I'm talking about. We have a new wave coming into the country, many of whom will be patriotic, many of whom won't care, but too many of whom are going to hate the very country that accepts them. You know what that's called? Suicide. That's called national suicide. So as Adam Credo writes at the Free Beacon, the Muslim Brotherhood's official online mouthpiece offers praise this week to Democratic members of Congress who are publicly criticizing Israel as it defends itself against an onslaught of terrorist rockets. And this is a growing movement, a growing wing within the Democrat Party. And notice Pelosi doesn't confront it. Notice Biden doesn't confront it. Even Chuck Schumer, who's Jewish, he doesn't confront it either. They tolerate it. No critical Jewish theory. Democratic representatives demand the protection of Palestinians from Zionist attacks, reads a headline in Ikhwan Online, the Brotherhood's official propaganda site. The jihadist extremist group, which is designated as a terror outfit in multiple countries, including ours, highlighted critical remarks about Israel's defensive operations made by outspoken opponents of the Jewish state, I would say anti-Semites, actually. Representatives Omar, Tlaib, Ayach, Andre Carson, Debbie Dingell, Mark Hogan, Cori Bush, Senator Bernie Sanders. More when I return.
When Mark Levin was a kid, his teachers didn't like his snide sense of humor. Today, they still don't like it. Call Mark Levin now at 877-381-3811.
Our friend Joe Pollack over at Breitbart, responding to Psaki and critical race theory and systemic racism, writes this: if there's such a thing as systemic racism, Press Secretary Jen Psaki is living proof. They took a privileged white woman who did zero for the campaign and elevated her above a more qualified black woman, Simone Sanders, who endured months on the trail and physically defended Biden. Maybe we'll have a courageous reporter ask Psaki the question or raise the issue that Pollack does. Aren't you an example of systemic racism? Because she is. I want to get back to this. I noticed that Twitter and Facebook have no problem with the anti-Semite Marxists in the Democrat Party posting and posting and posting. But Donald Trump, the greatest friend Israel ever had in the Oval Office, he's banned. The things that these people are saying, the accusations that they're making, are grotesque. Yet there's no policing of them by big tech. There's no policing of them by Schumer or Pelosi. No comments by the media, other than conservative media. So Adam Credo at the Free Beacon goes on. And so the Muslim Brotherhood site is praising Omar, Tlaib, AOC, Carson, Andre Carson, Debbie Dingell, Mark Pocan, or whatever the hell his name is, Cori Bush, there's a nut job if there ever was one, and Bernie Sanders. And the Muslim Brotherhood front site goes on. A large number from the American Democratic Party urged their government to try stopping the violence of the occupation forces. You know, the occupation forces, this is really quite remarkable. Those of you who have a Bible, show me where the Palestinians are in your Bible. They're not. Show me where the Jews are in your Bible. They are. Since when are people who have lived in a particular area for almost 4,000 years occupation forces? It's shocking. The occupation forces against the Palestinians in Jerusalem and the West Bank, the Arabic language article states, highlighting the support these liberal American lawmakers, Marxists most, have among anti-Israel extremist groups in the region. And the article was independently translated for the Washington Free Beacon. All the lawmakers mentioned are widely known for their anti-Israel views and supporting a range of organizations that seek to boycott the Jewish state and promote anti-Semitic slurs about the country. And that's why the vast majority are seen endlessly on CNN and MSNBC. And that's why, I suppose, they're promoted. And by the way, this Debbie Dingell, she's forever on Fox, on the business side. Never confronted about this. So Credo goes on. The criticism follows Israeli airstrikes directed at terrorist groups operating in the Gaza Strip. Why are there terrorist groups operating in the Gaza Strip, ladies and gentlemen? Why should there be terrorist groups operating in the Gaza Strip? The Gaza Strip was given to the Palestinians. These groups include Hamas, bombarded the country with more than 1,000 missiles, and now it's 2,000, in more than 2 days. Israel says it will continue to conduct defensive operations. Israeli airstrikes killing civilians in Gaza is an act of terrorism, Omar said in a statement that ignored Hamas's repeated strikes. Palestinians deserve protection. Unlike Israel, missile defense programs such as the Iron Dome don't exist to protect Palestinian civilians. It's unconscionable to not condemn these attacks. Omar's comments led Ted Cruz, a staunch Israel ally, to accuse her of acting as Hamas's press secretary. American taxpayer money is being used to commit human rights violations, Tlaib said in a similar statement. Congress must condition the aid we send to Israel and end it altogether if those conditions are not followed. Ayach joined with her fellow squad members to blast Israel for inciting violence. Pocan rushed to defend Omar after she came under fire for several anti-Israel statements. Tlaib, Omar, Pocan, Baker. Isn't that fascinating? The Democrat Party, and yet, to be perfectly honest with you, as I am all the time with my beloved audience, a majority, and not a small majority, of people who are born Jewish in this country, not particularly have any Jewish faith, are members of that party, support the policies of that party, are silent in the face of what these reprobates are saying, like Chuck Schumer. How many Jewish Democrats in the Senate, in the House, have spoken out against them? I know of none. None. And with all the talk of protecting and defending minorities in this administration, why hasn't Joe Biden gone to the microphone and condemned what his party is doing and saying? In fact, why hasn't Joe Biden gone to the microphone and said what Donald Trump would say? We support our ally Israel against its fight with terrorist organizations. And as a matter of fact, why is Joe Biden still negotiating with the Islamo-Nazi regime in Tehran, offering them hundreds of billions of dollars just to come back to the table and to lift sanctions when those missiles have "Made in Iran" written on them? Not technically, but factually. Tehran. Why are we negotiating with Tehran? Why are we lifting sanctions against Tehran? Why are we going to give hundreds of billions of dollars, directly and indirectly, to Tehran? Hezbollah in Lebanon, now they fired off a few missiles, aiming at civilian populations. I would ask Tlaib and Omar and the rest, why did Hamas and Islamic Jihad, which is a creation of Iran, why did they fire missiles at all? Why did they fire any missiles? And I would ask them, why don't you give the Jewish families that own those homes in Jerusalem, all four of them, why don't you give them their homes back? Why did you steal them? Now Tlaib, who's the biggest ass of the bunch, she likes to talk about apartheid. Where are all the Christians that used to live in Iraq? Where are all the Christians that used to live in Egypt? Where are all the Christians that used to live in Syria? Where are all the Christians that used to live in Lebanon? Where are all the Jews that used to live in these countries, and even more? Where are they? There's a handful of them or none. Where are all the Christians that used to live in Libya? Where are all the Jews that used to live in Libya? Apartheid? What a moronic, bizarre, extremist nutjob. The Arabs in Israel are citizens of Israel. They have due process rights. They get to go to court. They have private property rights. They get to vote. No Jew gets to do any such thing in any of these countries, let alone the Palestinian areas. They would be murdered on sight, as a matter of fact. And what happened in Lod, in some of these other Israeli towns, as Hamas and Islamic Jihad were firing Iranian-made missiles into the population centers of Israel? Well, the Arab neighbors of many of these Jews, not all, but many, enough, started burning their synagogues. Started going door to door looking for mezuzahs, which Jews put on their outer door and other doors in honor of God and the Torah. And Jews were taking down we're taking them down, mezuzahs, mezuzahs. We're taking them down so as not to be targeted. Tell me, how many mosques were targeted by the Israeli government? How many mosques burned to the ground? But facts don't matter. Facts don't matter when you're an anti-Semitic bigot like Omar, like Tlaib. This is how they were raised. This is how they were indoctrinated. And they brought their sickening, poisonous ideology into this country. And I want to repeat this again. I know of no one who hates the United States of America but loves Israel, and I know of no one who hates Israel but loves the United States of America. I don't know any such person. Because this wing of anti-Semitic Marxist Democrats hate our own country. They hate our own country. Let me put it to you bluntly, my fellow Levinites and patriots. And let me explain to the moron who calls herself Rashida. If the Israelis wanted to do maximum damage to the Gaza Strip and everything in Gaza and every person in Gaza, they would level Gaza. They have the military power to destroy everything and everyone in the Gaza Strip. They have the power to destroy the Palestinian Authority and all of their claimed territories and everything in it. They have an extraordinarily powerful military. So if Israel were like the communist Chinese, or Israel were like the fascist Putin, if Israel were like the communist North Koreans, if Israel were like any of those regimes, if Israel were like the Islamo-Nazi regime in Tehran, or the Palestinian terrorist operations in the Gaza Strip, or in Israel proper, Israel would cease to exist. Israel has a lot of power, but Israel has a lot of patience that most countries would not have. And so imagine if rockets were being fired into our major cities by Al-Qaeda or other terrorist organizations from right on the border of Mexico or right on the border of Canada. What would you want us to do? You'd want us to crush them and cream them. Joe Biden says Israel has a right to defend themselves. Israel doesn't need permission from Joe Biden to defend themselves. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Over 2,000 of you, my listeners, made the switch from overpriced wireless carriers to Pure Talk over the past few months. We want the rest of you to join us and to see what we're talking about. If you're with AT&T and Verizon or T-Mobile, your family could save over $800 a year just by switching to Pure Talk. You get great coverage, you can keep your phone and your number, and you'll save a fortune. Pure Talk is the top-rated wireless company by Consumer Affairs with the absolute best consumer service team based right here in America. Does that sound good? Well, it gets better. Right now, get unlimited talk, text, and 6 gigs of data, just $30 a month. And if you go over on data, they don't charge you for it. They don't care. Go to puretalkusa.com and enter promo code Levin Podcast. Again, puretalkusa.com, promo code Levin, Levin Podcast. And when you do, you'll save 50% off your first month. That's puretalkusa.com, promo code Levin Podcast. Pure Talk USA, simply smarter wireless. I think the Democrat Party has made a calculation. They've made a calculation that through birth and immigration, and remember, the Democrat Party is without morals in so many respects, that they believe that a lot of the ethnic and religious backgrounds of individuals coming into the United States, that they should endorse individuals in the Democrat Party like Tlaib and like Omar who are trying to appeal to these newer immigrants and are radicalizing these newer immigrants. And the Democrat Party wants to benefit from those immigrants, just as they want to benefit from open borders to begin with. It's a very devious, it is very dangerous, and it is a very evil game that the Democrat Party is playing. It is an amazing thing how the Republican Party quickly and severely denounces and punishes its own. But not the case with the Democrat Party. When Maxine Waters was stirring up a riot, depending on how the decision would go in Minneapolis, when the Republicans wanted to take action against her for what she did, really interfering with a court case, the fact of the matter is the Democrat Party and Pelosi and Hoyer threatened the Republicans that they would bring up other cases against other members. When Omar had made her openly and repeatedly anti-Semitic comments, and there was a move afoot to condemn her with a resolution, they watered it down, they never mentioned her, and they said, all hate is bad and so forth. The Democrat Party has a very, very high tolerance level for this kind of Marxist radicalism and anti-Semitism. And there are just too many stupid people out there who either agree with them or don't care, who want free benefits, and on and on and on. I'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, this final hour of the podcast is sponsored exclusively by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. Now over 2 million conservative members strong, AMAC believes in and stands up for the values that we care about: faith, family, and freedom. Thank you for listening, and please support AMAC. And you can become a member at amac.us/join.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Let's take some calls. Let's hear what you have to say about events here and around the world. Let's go to Ezra. Jacksonville, Florida, the great WBOB. Ezra, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I believe that you're absolutely correct that Putin was testing the plagiarizer-in-chief, and he failed. my first commander-in-chief, Reagan, or Trump, both, would never have had such a thing happen as we experienced, because Putin would already know the result.
Mm-hmm. And the result would be a counterattack, a cyber counterattack that would have a major impact, perhaps on the energy received by the Russians. All right, thank you for your call. There he goes. Let's continue. Tariq, Baltimore, Maryland, on the Mark Levin app. Tariq, how are you, sir?
Thank you so much for taking the call.
Oh, I
Mark.
apologize,
It's a pleasure to
ma'am.
speak to you.
I apologize. Go ahead.
Well, Tariq had to leave, so this is Tariq.
Oh.
So here's what he wanted to. Yeah, here's what I listen to you all the time anyway. So this is what he had to say. There's a lack of moral equivalence here. We take the position if someone comes to come in my house, I got a right to defend myself. But they're coming into the house called Israel. The Israelis have a right to defend themselves. Where is our speakers who speak out and say, hey, wait a second, they attacked the little guy. We're for the underdog. This is the underdog. They're surrounded by enemies. Where are our friends and allies who speak out against...
See, I think what's happened here, actually, putting aside the bomb thrower Marxist anti-Semites in the Democrat Party, I think what's happened with perhaps too many Democrats is that they now view Israel as this powerful country, which it is, putting upon all these poor peasants and so forth, the Palestinians. And if only as the Israelis would treat them well, they would be able to produce things and make things and live free lives and so forth and so on. And yet it's this Israeli government that has all this power that never exercises it in a way to wipe out any of these individuals. I mean, their citizenry and so forth, even though they aim missiles at the Israeli citizenry. And so I don't know how many more peace plans there can be. I don't know how much more land Israel can give. You can see how precious it is. They shouldn't give any. I don't know how many more biblical locations it can surrender to the Palestinians. But I think those days are over. No more.
They got to be over. I remember when the Jews left Gaza, it was a beautiful area with all kinds of fruits and vegetables and outhouses. And look what they did. They turned
it was a huge mistake. And I even think the Likud party was shocked. The conservatives in Israel were shocked on how that took place. Of course, America supported it every step of the way. But this demonstrates, though, the one thing it does do is it demonstrates that a two-state solution is a final solution for the Israeli people. They can't put up with that, regardless of what the Democrats in our country demand. Thank you for your call. Amy, Colorado Springs, XM Satellite. Amy, go right ahead, please. Go ahead, Amy.
Hi, Mark. First of all, I'd just like to say that I did pre-order your book, and I can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
So I'm waiting for that to come.
I think you're really going to like it.
I am a giddy, happy woman because I'm doing my little part. I went into Walmart today for the first time in over a year without a mask. And
wonderful.
It was so freeing. Everybody could see my cool shade of lipstick and my pretty smile, and it just felt so good. And there were other people without masks, and I'm tired of listening to the CDC, and I heard the news today, and I threw away
the news
my
today
mask.
was literally shocking because they had just said last week that if you send your kid to a camp, they got to wear a mask and 100 other things if they want to play outside with their friends and so forth. Absolutely ridiculous. So the CDC has really hurt itself. Fauci, of course, is a political actor. And the science in this country, unfortunately, certainly by the people who lead these various agencies and so forth, has been heavily politicized. And I want you to think about something, Amy. Donald Trump had to deal with this bureaucracy. He's the one that pushed through these vaccines. He's the one who wouldn't take no for an answer. He's the one who wouldn't take delays for an answer. All right. Thank you for your call. Let's continue. Terry, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the great WPHT. Terry, go right ahead.
Mark, how are you?
Okay.
I listened to your show last night. You hit on the fuel price. You hit on Israel, the Middle East, Iran, and the border. I have two more things and one that's going to happen. Two more things is North Korea and China. North Korea will probably do something stupid first. And then you're going to have the third thing will be Biden bringing back the draft. And I'm telling you, it's going to happen.
I don't think Biden will, actually. I think they'd like us to be in the climate change core and stuff like that. But you might be right. Who knows? Appreciate your call. And I want you to listen to Biden today on this. Let's see. Do we have that here? I'm not sure. Do we have him on the mask or not? Or should I just describe that? I want you to listen to Biden today on Cut 14. Just how this guy, all this stuff, all these crises that he created are swirling around us. They're swirling around the world. And he gets up, he has the nerve to say this like he had something to do with it. Like he had something to do with it when he had nothing to do with it. Cut 14, go.
No, I want to be clear about what the CDC is saying and what the CDC is not saying. The CDC is saying they have concluded that fully vaccinated people are at a very, very low risk of getting COVID-19. Therefore, if you've been fully vaccinated, you no longer need to wear a mask. Let me repeat, if you are fully vaccinated, you no longer need to wear a mask. But if you've not been vaccinated...
All right, that's enough. So why is he making this announcement when the CDC already did? He's making this announcement when the CDC already did. Let me tell you how cynical this man is. He has used propaganda and the crooked Democrat Party media to advance the idea that he brought the vaccines to the American people, that he's ensured that people are getting the vaccine shots, and now that you don't have to wear a mask. It's just it's amazing to me. This is a guy who's anti-science. This is a guy who tried to undermine Donald Trump and Operation Warp Speed every step of the way. This is a man who actually accused the president of killing people because of his response to the coronavirus. Joe Biden's had no response to this virus. He's picked up all the low-hanging fruit. There are 3 vaccines. He picks them off the tree and runs with them and takes credit for it. There's a massive distribution plan in place with private companies, with warehouse stores, with stores like CVS and so forth, and he takes credit for that. The military is already involved in distribution when he shows up. I mean, he was handed the keys to the palace. He was handed the keys to the palace. And so the obvious outcome from having vaccines over a period of time, which is exactly why Donald Trump wanted vaccines and fought for vaccines, the obvious outcome is what? The one we have now, removing masks. And you could have removed your mask as soon as you got the vaccine shot. Or those of you who got two shots. You didn't need the CDC to tell you this, just as a regular person, a normal person, knowing what the science is. What's the purpose of getting a vaccine? That means you're at least 95% immune from the virus and immune from giving the virus since you aren't getting the virus. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, is one of the fastest growing organizations in America, now over 2 million conservative members strong, and I'm one of them. AMAC believes in and stands up for the values that we constitutional conservatives care about. More than talk, AMAC fights. A full-time presence in Washington, AMAC pushes back against reckless spending, disasters like Medicare for All, and the expanding reach of the federal government. And beyond advocacy, joining AMAC gives you access to a wealth of benefits and discounts, including special member-only rates on car insurance, travel discounts, cell phone plans, and a hell of a lot more. And if that's not enough, you'll get AMAC's bi-monthly magazine, full of insightful articles on issues that matter to most of us, we conservatives. As I said, I'm an AMAC member, and you should be too. Join today at amac.us. That's AMAC.us. Stop supporting the liberal agenda that the other 50-plus organization has been pushing for. Join AMAC instead. AMAC.us. One thing I've noticed, and one thing other people have noticed, is literally since we've been talking about this book, American Marxism, already a movement seems to be developing. Have you noticed that, Mr. Producer? Already a movement seems to be developing to push back against these various movements spawned by Marxism, these various American Marxist movements. I get behind this microphone and I discuss these movements, I discuss these issues at some length. And perhaps some of you are a little cynical. You say, well, there he is hawking his book. I am hawking our country. That's what I'm hawking. I'm spending time on this, I could be spending time on other stuff like so many other hosts. That's not what I do. My weekends, my nights, up early in the morning. I don't want you to pat me on the back. I'm just trying to explain myself. And we've been talking about these things now for a long time. And we've been giving them a lot of attention. We've been giving some of the people involved in them a lot of attention. I see more and more people showing up on Fox, more and more people showing up on radio. This is a good thing because what we know here on the Mark Levin radio show is we're the point of the spear. That's what we are. You're hearing more and more people talk about Marxism now. There's a reason for that. You're hearing more and more people talk about critical race theory and the racism that's involved in this now. That's important. There have been scholars working on this. Christopher Rufo. We have Mike Gonzalez. We have a lot of people in different organizations who've been working hard at this that haven't gotten the attention that they deserve. But more and more they will, and they deserve it. Same with the degrowth climate change movement. Marco Moreno and others. You have people who are focused on these things. But my goal here is to bring all of this together, to explain all of this. And I have this massive microphone because of you, my massive audience, on radio and on TV. and on digital. And so when I start talking about these things, there are producers, there are directors, assistant producers, deputy producers. I'm being heard. You're being heard. And so people are trying to sort of expose these various things now. And I'm seeing it more and more on TV and radio. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. And when the book American Marxism is finally released, I expect this movement in every direction, pushing back against American Marxism, to explode into activism. Into activism. Because it's not just critical race theory. It's the immigration issue. What is that based on? It's not just the immigration issue. It's the genderism issue. What is that all about? It's not just the genderism issue. It's the repression. It's the cancel caucus. It's big tech. It's big media. It's the degrowth movement, the attack on our capitalist system. And so this can overwhelm you. And so it needs to be broken down and unraveled. And so I am excited. In fact, I am proud because of you. When we see things happening in my own home county of Loudoun County, there's a reason. Because it's pushback time. There's a reason this is being discussed more. Because I use this microphone to push a mission. The mission is liberty. And to push back against tyranny. And so it is heard far and wide. All throughout Washington, D.C. All throughout the broadcast companies. And that's thanks to you, or I wouldn't be here. And so there are many, many great heroes and patriots out there who've been fighting rather quietly. And you're going to learn an enormous amount of information from this book, American Marxism. I said it's the most important book I've ever written, and I mean it, for the most important time of my life. And so this will provide all of you with the ideas, with the facts, with the substance, and potentially the activism that we need. Again, you're starting to see it sprout here and there. Starting to see it sprout here and there. When I first got into talk radio, the rule was don't become an activist. Don't be an activist. I said I have to. That's what I believe in. And honestly, when I started this show 20 years ago, it was the only show that promoted activism. Not only was I involved in the Tea Party and helped launch the Tea Party, but I got involved in these various primary campaigns, you might recall. I was attacked by various pseudo-conservative outlets. I was attacked by Republicans in Congress. You can still see how John Boehner can't stand me, McConnell can't stand me. Well, that's their problem. The Bushies hate my guts. This establishment versus outsider conservative, we're the ones who started that right here behind this microphone 20 years ago. There have been books written. I don't even tell you about it, which attempt to smear me and attack me for launching this movement or that movement. I ignore them. I don't care. This whole idea of constitutional conservatism, we had fiscal conservatives, traditional conservatives, social conservatives. So wait a minute. In the end, we're constitutional conservatives. That's what we are. Who believe in tradition, who believe in our institutions, who believe in our... But we're constitutional conservatives because without that, we can't do the rest of it. And I think that's why you come to this program. So it's very, very exciting to see, even before the release of American Marxism, the impact this program, radio, TV, Levin TV, is having, and the book, I think, is going to have an enormous effect. You watch. Well, don't watch. Participate. Jump in. And tens of thousands of you already have. Tens of thousands of you. The pre-orders on American Marxism are shocking the publishing industry. Shocking them. I mentioned it to Sean Hannity the other day. He said, holy, really? I said, look at the numbers. That's you. You're doing that. And that's very important. And by the way, I'm going to have, after the bottom of the hour, Bill O'Reilly on the program. He has a fantastic new book out. You might say, why would you have Bill O'Reilly on? You never get along. I get along with Bill O'Reilly very well now. We actually got to know each other. And he's under attack all the time, too. My view is patriotic voices anywhere and everywhere. I'm for him. All right, ladies and gentlemen, just as I said, Bill O'Reilly will be up with yours truly. I hope you'll listen. We'll be right back. AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, is one of the fastest growing organizations in America. Now over 2 million conservative members strong, and I'm one of them. AMAC believes in and stands up for the values that we constitutional conservatives care about. More than talk, AMAC fights. A full-time presence in Washington, AMAC pushes back against reckless spending, disasters like Medicare for All, and the expanding reach of the federal government. And beyond advocacy, joining AMAC gives you access to a wealth of benefits and discounts, including special member-only rates on car insurance, travel discounts, cell phone plans, and a hell of a lot more. And if that's not enough, you'll get AMAC's bi-monthly magazine, full of insightful articles on issues that matter to most of us, we conservatives. As I said, I'm an AMAC member, and you should be too. Join today at amac.us. That's AMAC.us. Stop supporting the liberal agenda that the other 50-plus organization has been pushing for. Join AMAC instead. AMAC.us.
Mark Levin, America's passionately cerebral voice. Talk with that voice now. 877-381-3811.
Bill O'Reilly, how are you, sir?
I'm okay, Mr. Levin. Thank you for the good lead-in to WABC Radio. Your program leads right into mine every night, and I appreciate the good numbers.
Well, it's great to have you back. And speaking of good numbers, your book is a hit. Killing the Mob, The Fight Against Organized Crime in America. Give us a flavor for what this is about.
Well, number one book on the New York Times a week
That's
from
a big
Sunday.
deal. Congratulations.
And I beat Oprah.
Thank goodness.
I beat Oprah. So that'll give those cancel culture people a little angst. Anyway, Killing the Mob is a look at the most powerful entity in the United States from 1946 to 1961. Organized crime controlled the movie industry, the rock industry, the nightclubs, the unions. They bribed politicians. They ran wild. And nobody knows it. And we take it from the 30s and the Depression, John Dillinger, Bonnie and Clyde, all of that when the FBI was formed, right up to the present day. And I'll tell your audience that no president has been more revered by organized crime than Joe Biden.
Really? Why is that?
You know why?
Yeah.
Since Joe Biden has been president, about 500,000 foreign nationals have come to the United States. 500,000 through the southern border. That has occupied every single Border Patrol agent and every ICE agent down there. So what is neglected when all of our federal officials have to house, feed, process, put people on buses? What's neglected?
Mm-hmm.
Drug interdiction. Organized crime controls the narcotic distribution throughout the United States. It's billions and billions of dollars. More drugs are coming into the country tonight as we speak on a Thursday night than ever before in the history of the United States.
And Bill O'Reilly, Joe Biden acts like nothing's happening down there.
He doesn't know.
You think?
Look, here's my assessment of Mr. Biden. So when I write Killing the Mob, every page is documented. Everything I say is proven. It's like your broadcast. You back stuff up. You're not just throwing it off the top of your head. That's what we do in Killing the Mob, and that's why the book is out of the gate the way it is. Joe Biden is the opposite of that. His strongest statement is, well, we haven't seen any evidence of it. Well, you haven't looked. I mean, he doesn't understand what inflation is. I think everybody would understand that. Does Joe understand that gas is up $1 a gallon since he got inaugurated? Does he understand that once gas goes up, everything goes up because trucks have to get the groceries to the grocery store? Does he understand macroeconomics? The answer is he does not. And now you're looking at Israel, you're looking at China, you're looking at these countries. They know. They know that Mr. Biden's not running the government, that progressives behind the scenes are running it. They know all that. And organized crime, I'm not overstating this. I mean, they are deliriously happy that their business selling narcotics, which is about as evil as it gets, is not being impeded by the federal government right now.
Mm-hmm. Now, your book, why do you think your book is so compelling?
Because people don't know this. Remember I Love Lucy? Mm-hmm. Remember that show?
Oh, sure.
Who was Lucy's husband?
Desi
Arnaz, right?
Yeah.
Sam Giancana took a contract out on his life. He came this close to having a bullet in the back of the head.
Really?
Desi Arnaz was a Hollywood producer, and he put on a show called The Untouchables.
All right.
In The Untouchables, Al Capone and all the other gangsters were Italian. Giancana, the godfather of Chicago, who rigged the 1960 election for JFK, sent a note to Desi Arnaz, said, you better knock it off and put other ethnicities in the show. Arnaz wrote a wise guy note back to Sam Giancana, said, what do you want me to make them, Jews? That day, there was a contract put on Desi Arnaz's life. We have the guy who got the contract. We have the whole thing. And Desi, I'm not going to tell you anymore because I want people to read Killing the Mob, but he just survived. I mean, what would she have done? But that's a true story.
Now, the mob has always fascinated me because the mob is more than one mob, isn't it? There's a bunch of families, different ethnicities over the years, correct?
Yes. They're different organized crime families, quote unquote, control different cities. So in each major American city, there are a group of people who divide up the city, and they do business. Now, it used to be extortion and gambling and vice, but now it's almost all narcotics because the governments are legalizing all the vice and all the gambling. So, and Oregon's legalized hard drugs, but they cooperate with each other to some extent, but there's always violence. And here's a kicker for your audience. All the violent crime in Chicago and New York, L.A., all the murder rates that we hear every day, that's all drug gang related. The drug gangs sell the heroin and the methamphetamine and the cocaine on the street, but they have to pay the mob for that right to deal on the street. The mob doesn't see the dope anymore like they did in the French Connection days. They're corporate now. They oversee the narcotics traffic. But the guys on the street, they're doing all the murders. But you're never going to hear the media report any of this.
Now, as these borders are open, you talked about drugs, the MS-13 gangs come in. Is the nature of the mob changing, or we just have more mobs, or the old mob getting stronger?
Well, the Italians still control the East Coast cities, like Philadelphia and New York, Baltimore, to some extent Boston, but there's a big Irish component in Boston. So that structure is changed from Don Corleone in The Godfather. Okay, that's the image that everybody has. They're not that way anymore. They bought up so many legitimate businesses, restaurants and nightclubs and hotels and cruise ships, you name it. And they operate on a quasi-legal basis. They all live in the suburbs. They all have big mansions in the Hamptons or, Georgetown, Washington. So it's not the way it used to be, but it's still as evil. It is really evil. Now, you mentioned MS-13. They're not in that category. Those are thugs. Those are punks. Those are shakedown artists. They're low-level dope dealers. The real powerful organized crime don't have anything to do with them. And it's almost like a caste system in America. At the top are the remnants of the old Sicilian mafia.
Mm-hmm. Is the mob stronger today than it was 30, 40 years ago? The mob.
Because J. Edgar Hoover would not investigate the mob because, according to Lucky Luciano's personal papers, and Martin Dugard, my co-author, and I got a hold of them, the mob had something on J. Edgar Hoover. Now, we couldn't find out what it was, but we do know that Hoover liked the ponies, he was a gambler, and he was gay. And back then, if he had been exposed as gay, that would have ended his career. So Luciano said in his private papers, we have Hoover in our pocket. All right, and they had a lot of other people in their pocket, too. And J. Edgar Hoover never, ever investigated the mob. That allowed organized crime to amass this tremendous amount of power. But when Bobby Kennedy became Attorney General in 1961, he went after the mob with a ferocity never before seen. And he got Hoffa. Hoffa went to prison. And then the mob assassinated Hoffa when he got out of prison. So in return, Congress passed the RICO laws, and you being an attorney, you know how effective the RICO laws are against organized crime because you can wiretap, you can surveil much easier, get a warrant much easier. That's what happened to Gotti, the last in-your-face Godfather. They wired up the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club 20 miles from my house in Queens, and they got him talking about all these murders and all his dope deals, and he got sentenced to the federal pen in Illinois where he died of cancer inside. He was the last real flamboyant mobster. The rest of them now are businessmen.
I need to take a little break. Can you hang on for our final segment?
Sure, this is fun. Thank you for having me.
It's great talking. Well, this is fascinating. Very fascinating. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, is one of the fastest-growing organizations in America, now over 2 million conservative members strong, and I'm one of them. AMAC believes in and stands up for the values that we constitutional conservatives care about. More than talk, AMAC fights. A full-time presence in Washington, AMAC pushes back against reckless spending, disasters like Medicare for All, and the expanding reach of the federal government. And beyond advocacy, joining AMAC gives you access to a wealth of benefits and discounts, including special member-only rates on car insurance, travel discounts, cell phone plans, and a hell of a lot more. And if that's not enough, you'll get AMAC's bi-monthly magazine, full of insightful articles on issues that matter to most of us, we conservatives. As I said, I'm an AMAC member, and you should be too. Join today at amac.us. That's AMAC.us. Stop supporting the liberal agenda that the other 50-plus organization has been pushing for. Join AMAC instead. AMAC.us. #1 best-selling book in the country, Killing the Mob, The Fight Against Organized Crime in America. You can get it on Amazon.com, any major bookstore. This book is fascinating. It's Killing the Mob, The Fight Against Organized Crime in America with Bill O'Reilly. You can get it at Amazon.com, any major bookstore for that matter. Was there anything, as you were developing this book and researching this book, that jumped out at you that you hadn't known before?
Most of it. I had a blast writing this book. But the biggest thing was the general Patton component.
Really?
I wrote a book called Killing Patton, and it sold millions of copies. And listen to this story. You're going to love this, Mark. So after Rommel was defeated in North Africa by the Americans and the British, Eisenhower and FDR planned to invade Europe through Italy. Patton was the spearhead. He was in North Africa. But they had to go to Sicily first because that was the closest place to North Africa. But they had no idea how to do the invasion. Well, the mafia controlled Sicily for centuries. And the mafia was disrespectful to Mussolini. He couldn't even break them. They made a deal with Lucky Luciano, the first godfather. FDR made the deal with Luciano, not in person, but by using surrogates. And the deal was, you help us invade Sicily. You get Patton's Third Army on that island, and we'll allow some Sicilians to come to the United States after the war. I had no blanking idea that thing happened. No one does. But that's exactly what went down. The mafia practiced sabotage on the Germans, gave Patton all the maps on where to land. He did. And then after the war, a slew of mafioso showed up in New York, solidified the power with the unions, and that's where the five families evolved from.
What about the mob in relation to John Kennedy? Is that something you were able to take a look at?
Big story. Yeah, we get into it big time. So, I know we're up against the clock. I'll give you the abbreviated version. Joseph Kennedy, JFK's father, was friends with Sam Giancana and a bunch of other mobsters. He wasn't a mobster himself, but he got favorable treatment on the Merchandise Mart in Chicago and other places where the mob had a presence. In 1960, it was a very close election, and the Kennedys needed to win Illinois. Giancana delivered Cook County to JFK, and Illinois and West Virginia were enough to defeat Richard Nixon. Nixon knew it. He knew that there was fraud in Illinois, but didn't push it. And the rumor is they had something on Nixon. The mob did. Anyway, the mob was thrilled. JFK's there. They thought they had him in his pocket. What they didn't count on was JFK appointing his brother Attorney General. When Bobby got in there, he defied his father and to some extent his brother, and he went after the mob, as I said, with a ferocity never before seen on the federal level. Isn't that an interesting story?
It's fascinating. And people don't know about that election, and you're exactly right.
They don't know anything about the mob, because we all think it's the Godfather, the Sopranos, Bonnie and Clyde. These mobsters were so evil, are so evil. The evil that they do is staggering, but they get away with it for the most part until. There's always an until. They all went down. None of them got away. They either went to prison or they got a bullet between the eyes.
And very quickly, Rudy Giuliani had a hell of a role, didn't he, in fighting the mob?
He took the RICO law, okay? Giuliani, as a Southern District U.S. attorney, took that RICO law and just destroyed many of the New York City mob. And he did an excellent job. And then when he was catapulted into the mayorship, he cleaned up New York City. If you go to New York City today, you won't believe the deterioration under that idiot Bill de Blasio.
Unbelievable. Let me tell you something. This is a terrific book. It's Killing the Mob, The Fight Against Organized Crime in America. I strongly suggest, folks, you get a copy at Amazon.com or any major bookstore. And listening to you, Bill, when we took the little break, my producer, my call screener, and I said, nobody tells a story like Bill O'Reilly. You have the ability to tell a story.
I really, you're very kind to put me on, and I want all your listeners to know that you're very busy. You got a lot of stuff going on, but you're very kind to put me on and to say nice things about the book. And when your book comes out in July, I will return that favor.
Well, you're a very good man. I appreciate it. Take care of yourself.
Thank you, Mark.
All right. God bless. And it's a damn good book. Killing the Mob, The Fight Against Organized Crime in America. You know, your book isn't number one just because of your name. It just isn't. And Bill writes these great books. And this book is fascinating. I got through part of it, obviously not all of it. And he leaves no stone unturned. And you can hear how he tells a story. It's fascinating the way he tells a story. So go grab a copy. And while you're there, maybe pre-order a copy of American Marxism. Ladies and gentlemen, we salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, and emergency personnel. And you know who else? I salute you. The greatest audience of audiences. God bless you and be well. Take care.